Whenever you're ready to drift off, let your jaw loosen and your shoulders settle. Tonight, let's quietly explore for small workplaces where patient hands shape ordinary things. We'll begin on a Roman shore at first light, where brine lies shallow and a wooden rake gathers tiny cubes of salt that shine like sleepy stars. Then we'll slip into a Heian Incense room in Kyoto, where scent is blended like music on warm charcoal. We'll rest beneath a woven market awning in oil, listening to Cowries whisper as they are weighed and counted, and we'll end at a rural telegraph desk after midnight, where a con lamp and a soft key keep company with a tapping wire. The pace will stay slow and friendly. Simple words, gentle detail. No hurry, no sharp turns made for rest, not surprise. We'll notice the weight of a scoop, the hush of a brush on paper, the feel of shells in the palm, and the small patience of a ticking stove. If your thoughts wander, they are welcome too. You can leave them where the air is easy and the work is steady. As you settle in for the night, breathe a little deeper. When your mind feels ready, we will step out to the salt pans, where sun and sea conspire to leave crystals behind. And a rake remembers yesterday's line. The day begins low to the ground. It smells of kelp, wet rope, and the clean edge of brine. The salt pans spread in a tidy patchwork near the sea, shallow as a hand, each basin bordered by raised pots of packed earth. In the dim, the pots hold last night's cool. Beyond them, the shore lifts in a gentle brow. Beyond that, water lies quiet as if listening. A gate stick lifts with a wooden sigh. Thin water, already heavy with the sea's memory, slides from one pond to the next. It travels by patience, not by hurry, each basin a step closer to dryness. The man who moves the gate leans without strain. He knows how much a morning can carry before the sun asks for more. He plants the stick in the damp wall and wipes his palm on a linen strip tied around his belt. Sandals scuff softly on the path. Two workers arrive together, their wicker baskets stacked on a hand sledge that creaks as if telling a story. The baskets are shallow and wide, the weave smooth from many harvests. A long wooden rake rides the sledge too, its teeth worn rounded by crystal after crystal. The youngest of the pair carries a forked branch, the ends split and smooth, a tool for coaxing reeds and stray leaves away from the brine. The first order is quiet-looking. They walk the edges, watching surfaces, for the language salt speaks faint film near the leeward side, tiny islands where yesterday's evaporation kissed the basin and left a thin crust. A fingertip touches a corner. The film breaks with a whisper like silk. Good. The day will move. They eat a bite standing up. Bread, coarse and friendly. A few olives, glossy, passing a small jar between them. The jar smells of rosemary. Oil takes the chill from their tongues. The youngest laughs once, too softly to alarm the morning, at a bird hopping on a pan's edge and thinking better of it. The bird leaves one neat track, then none. Work begins with the rake. Its handle is long enough to keep feet dry and back straight. The man sets the teeth just under the brine skin and draws a steady path. Crystal grains, small as coarse sand, roll and gather. The water around them turns a shade clearer. Another pass, and another, parallel as woven threads. The rake comes in a low wooden way against the pan floor. Tiny drifts form like low walls, square-edged because the rake thinks in straight lines. When the wind picks up, these squares hold their shape, and dry faster, their tops flashing when clouds move. At the far corner, a boy he comes most mornings skins the surface with his forked branch. He catches to wind-blown reeds the color of tea and lays them on the path to dry. He likes the sound the branch makes when it writes in water. He will use the dry reeds later to start a cook fire under a clay pot, and the pot will keep water hot enough to soften the wax on amphor plugs. The work is a circle, and the boy likes how the circle never scolds. At intervals, a gate is opened a thumb's width. The thin water walks on. In the first evaporating ponds, the brine still holds the sea's taste more than the sun's. Farther along it thickens and keeps the light differently, like glass melted but not poured. In the last pans, the brine barely moves. A fingertip dip and lifted shows a skin on the nail. The rake returns here more often. It does not hurry. The crystals answer better to rhythm than to force. Tools wait where they were placed yesterday. A wooden scoop shaped to fit the mouth of a clay amphora, a shallow tray for catching drips, a handful of linen cloths that no longer pretends to be wide. The scoop has a smooth lip burnished by salt. It knows how to guide crystals without bruising them. The amphora stands with its plug of waxed linen darkened by oil. Its shoulder bears a mark in red to strokes, and a curve that says which family will take this jar when the day cools. Marks speak quickly where many hands share a shore. The sun comes up to the work rather than the work to the sun. It warms the path first, then the men's sleeves, then the brine, which shines for a moment like polished metal. Wind, light but present, plays along the low walls and smudges the smell of the sea across everything. On some days, the wind is the foreman. Today it is friendly and does not insist. A small clay cup fills from a skin and is passed. The water tastes like nothing except welcome. A crust of bread shakes a few crumbs onto the path, and a stray dog, dignified and careful, eats them when no one looks. The dog's paws leave neat ovals in damp dust that the sun will flatten out by noon. Now the sound of other pans, a distant rake, a woman rattling a basket to seat its edge, someone tapping a gate stick into a hole with the heel of a hand. Voices are low. Calls are short. The place speaks more in motions than in words. An older man clears his throat and sings the line of a field song from years ago, but only the part that fits the length of his basin. He stops when the line ends and begins again quietly when the rake turns. When a square ridge shows itself crisp enough, the scoop comes out. The worker kneels at the pan's edge and slides the scoop under the low wall as if persuading a loaf from its mold. The crystals agree and lift in a heap that holds the shape of the scoop, and then slumps a little. They are poured onto a slanted plank where the brine that clings to them runs back to the pan. In a few breaths the heat dulls from wet sparkle to a gentle mat. The pile is ready for the basket. Wicker accepts the salt without complaint. The basket's base has a weave tight enough to keep crystals from falling and open enough to let the last of the brine whisper out. The man spreads the first scoop thin, then another, keeping weight even so the basket rides the sledge without arguing. He ties a cord across the basket's mouth in a quick tumble of fingers that ends with a knot that knows how to hold and how to undo. The boy brings the little clay pot to the corner of the path where dry sticks wait. He sets the pot in a ring of stones and feeds the sticks under it one by one. There is no rush. The flame learns its job. A breath of steam slips from the pot's mouth. When it is hot enough, He dips a cloth, wrings it out with careful hands, and touches it to the amphora's waxed plug. The wax softens, the fibers of the cloth make their imprint, and the plug yields. The jar opens with a learned sigh. The first basket's worth of salt will go in when it has let go of its last dampness. The boy replaces the plug loosely to keep wandering dust away. Here and there along the paths, little cones of shells stand where someone left a meal's work behind a pile of mollusk shells turned to white by sun. Their edges are soft. They do not belong to the salt, and yet the salt forgives them. A gull stands on one cone as if it were a lighthouse, and then decides to stand on the next one to see if it feels different. It does not. The older worker pauses to rub a door's worth of wearing to the handle of the rake with his palm. A tool that lives in the hand likes to remember the hand. He checks the teeth for splinters and finds none. He touches the pan floor with the rake and listens for the scrape that would betray a stone. There is only the hum of wood on well-trampled clay. A set of square ridges further out catches the sun as a cloud decides to be elsewhere. They glow like folded linen laid out to air. Soon they will be pushed toward the plank, lifted and carried. Soon the amphora will be heavier and truer. For now the men draw their lines, open the gates a thumb width more, and let the morning do what it knows. If a passer be asked what time it is, someone might point to the shadow of a basket handle on the path and say enough. The sea will be afternoon when the baskets have gone twice to the storehouse and back, and the lines on the pans will look like a page that has been carefully written. The boy rinses the forked branch in a shallow trickle that runs between basins. A sliver of reed floats away and wedges under pebble. The sliver does not resist. It knows it will move later. The dog finds a spot in the sun that is no one's way and keeps watch with eyes that close more than they open. There is nothing to fix, only things to do. The rake draws, the basket receives, the gate remembers its notch, the amphora learns its weight. The light grows a shade stronger and shows the crystals exactly as they are, small, square, patient. By mid-morning the wind learns its stride. Not strong, only steady. It brushes along the low clay walls and crosses the pans like a hand-smoothing cloth. The brine listens and answers by moving a little quicker in the basins where it is thin, and by standing and shining where it is heavy. The light has warmed enough to rest in the shoulders. Sleeves are pushed to the elbow. Sandals remember the path without looking. Gate sticks lift and settle in new notches. The men use the back of the hand to judge. A good notch is one that does not argue when you leave it. Water walks forward, pond to pond, growing quieter as salt gathers. The boy follows with the forked branch and skims whatever the wind has offered: bits of grass, a seed husk, a feather that seems to want to be here but does not belong. Each thing is removed with courtesy and set aside on the dry bank to change its mind. Where the brine has thickened to the color of pale tea, the rake returns. Teeth slip just beneath the glitter and draw careful lanes. The wooden hum is lower now, like a voice answering from a different room. Grains roll and meet one another until they are not just grains, but small company. The lanes end in square ridges that hold themselves upright as if proud of being simple. A woman from the store hut appears along the path with a strap of counting cords over her shoulder, each cord tied with knots of different sizes. The knots are not secrets, they are reminders. She greets with a small lift of the chin. Her reed brush rides in a jar with thin clay walls, and beside it a bottle of red slip. She will paint quick marks on the shoulders of jars when they are filled: house sign, pan number, and the day. Marks are like birds' footprints on wet sand, light enough, soon dry. The first amphor takes its portion. The scoop passes from the plank to the jar and back again, each movement with its own soft sound. The man stops before the last scoop and gives the jar a roll on its base to settle what is inside. The sound is like the hush of fine grain sliding in a clay throat. He adds the last scoop and another small half scoop so the jar stands satisfied but not proud. Warm cloth goes to the plug, the wax remembers and yields. The plug is seated firm with a thumb that knows where to press. The woman steps in, tips the reed brush, and writes the red strokes that will tell anyone who asks where these crystals began and whose hands taught them to be tidy. The paint darkens, then dries to a soft brick color against the pale clay. Baskets leave the pans 2 at a time on the sledge. The sledge's runners are bound with worn leather to keep them kind to the path. The boy takes the front rope and walks, as if he and the sledge had agreed on the pace yesterday. At the store hut, the woman notes the loads with one finger on the cord knots. She says the numbers out of habit, not because anyone doubts them, but because numbers like to hear themselves spoken once in the air before they live on a cord. Back at the pans, a little shade stretches beside a low wall. It is enough for a meal. A cloth is spread on a plank. Bread comes out, split by thumb and forefinger along yesterday's cut. Olives roll into a small wooden bowl. A wedge of cheese sits on its side and invites a knife to make plain shapes. The rosemary oil jar is uncorked and tips a friendly dot onto the bread's open mouth. There is a cucumber with a skin that shines like river water. A pinch dish offers salt thereon, not because salt is scarce, but because it is good to taste what you make. They eat without ceremony. The wind keeps flies from claiming a corner. Someone folds cheese into bread and presses it once with the heel of a hand to teach it how to be held. The boy drinks from the skin and passes it along the short circle. The dog sits out of the way and pretends not to know what food is, which is a way of asking. A crumb falls to the path. The crumb is found by the right mouth. A small happiness passes without needing a name. From farther down the works, a wagon speaks a low creak and the soft step of hooves. It is only passing, not for them yet. The sound of a rope being coiled reaches the ear and stops, then begins again. On the shore, water lifts and sighs. The tide has its own book of notches. After the meal, work resumes with hands clean on cloth. The rake goes back to its lines. The boy checks the gate faces for weeping cracks and smears a little mud into one, smoothing it with the back of a shell that once held a small animal and now finds it nice to be useful again. A small leak can become a large leak if no one speaks to it today. It is content to be taught manners. As the sun climbs, the brine warms and answers more quickly to the wind. Tiny crystals form along the edges where the water is thinnest. Seen close, they are neat cubes with the tiniest lights on their corners. Seen from standing, they look like faint frost that forgot the season. The man draws the rake, pauses, and watches the line of brightness lean into itself and become a small ridge. Ridges multiply like good thoughts. The woman at the store hut writes more marks and ties new knots. Sometimes she loosens a knot and slides it closer to its neighbor, a simple adjustment and an old one. Knots do not take offense. A handspan of cord with 5 knots sits proud of the rest. It will be today's tally for a particular pan. She will move the handspan to the hook for that family when the sun is lower. This replaces a chalk line that the wind kept erasing. The cord does not care about wind. Heat fills the air without scolding. The men keep to their measured rhythm so sweat never feels like a mistake. The boy dips his branch in the shallow channel and lifts it again to watch a thin rope of water fall back and write a quick letter no one needs to read. The rake's handle has worn to the palm and no longer feels like a separate thing. The scoop slip shines where salt polished it. A stray conversation belongs to a subject that likes clean lines. How long the wind has held from this quarter. Whether the next pan will finish before the sun slides to the shoulder of the hill. Whether the kiln that fires new amphory will be ready by market day. The talk is short, the answers are mostly nods. This kind of gate does not ask for wide words. One pan farthest from the sea finishes its square ridges in a way that pleases the eye. The man gestures with his chin and the boy comes to see. It is good for the young to know what pleasing looks like. The ridges are evenly spaced, none higher than another, all with tops that have learned to stay flat so wind will pass over without mischief. The boy says nothing and nods in a way that promises future ridges will try to behave like these. Now and then a gull laughs and then thinks better of it. A cloud considers the pans, sets down a brief shadow the shape of a well-fed sheep, and leaves. The smell of brine has become the smell of sun on brine, which has its own quiet sweetness. 2 more amphorae are filled. The woman writes the red strokes, the brush whispering against clay, the characters decided and spare. A tiny drip runs down one shoulder and dries into a faint pink thread. The jar does not mind. It is going to a place where someone will break the seal and take a pinch at a time as if drawing tiny white squares from a pocket of the sea. At the edge of the works, a marker stone leans worn by years of pale light and winter wind. Someone long ago carved a simple sign in it, 2 short lines and one longer one just enough to say begin here. The men pass it many times each day without looking. It is part of their feet now. The wind smells briefly of fish and boat tar, then returns to its clean self. The boy remembers a story an uncle told about a winter when the pans froze at the very top, and someone used a rake to draw pictures on the skin of ice. He does not say the story aloud. Stories rest better while hands are busy. When the sun stands a little past the half of the sky, the man lifts the rake, sets its teeth up on the sledge, and rolls his shoulders once. The motion is small. There is more to do. The day is nowhere near finished, but it is comfortably underway. Numbers live quietly in the cord knots at the store hut and in the eyes of the workers who know what a good morning yields. No one makes a speech. The tally sits in the body and feels like the right size. Salt waits in the ridges and glows without trying. The gate sticks rest in their notches as if they had chosen them. The amphorae stand with their painted shoulders turned toward the path, ready to be carried to the cool of the store hut. The dog sleeps with one ear open. The shore breathes. The noon hour arrives without a knock. Each steps onto the path and sits down. Light grows heavy on the shoulders in a way that is not unkind. only firm. The men answer it with simple tools and a few old tricks. A reed screen comes out from the store hut, rolled like a sleeping mat. The boy carries one end, the woman the other. They set two forked poles into holes that already know their shape, lift the screen onto the forks, and tilt it so the shade falls where hands will work next. The reed smell wakes as the sun warms it, dry and sweet, like straw that still remembers water. The shade is not big. It does not need to be. A small patch to step into between tasks is enough to remind the body that the day is friendly. Hats go on simple wool caps for two, a linen scarf tied behind the neck for the boy. The woman pins her head cloth higher at the brow so air can move. A wet cloth is draped around the back of a neck and left to draft. The water skin hangs from the reed fork and swings a little in the breeze. When it is lifted, a finger rubs the spout clean with the edge of a cloth, a sip is taken, a mouth is rinsed, the water swallowed slowly. No one makes the skin speak loudly. It will be needed all afternoon. Out in the far pans, the brine has turned thick enough to wear a pale crust. The crust is fragile where it begins and sure where it ends. From the sledge the man takes a wooden paddle with a wide, blunt face, edges sanded smooth by many summers. He steps to the pan's edge and puts the paddle flat on the top skin with a soft push. The crust gives with a sound like thin pottery being set down. He draws the paddle toward him, and the crust curls up from the pan floor in a calm sheet that breaks into obedient plates. The boy watches the angle of the paddle and nods, copying the motion with his eyes before he copies it with his hands. Plate after plate slides onto the slanted plank and lies, while the sun and wind remember their part. The rake, set aside for this step, waits teeth up. When the plates dull from wet brightness to a soft, even tone, the rake returns to break them into pieces that pour easily. The pieces move like well-behaved gravel, whispering down the plank into a waiting basket. The basket's shadow shows a warm edge now. The sun draws neat lines around simple shapes. A crack shows in a low wall where the clay has remembered that it was once mud. It is not large, only a mouth that wants to widen. The woman calls for the clay tub. A shallow trough of wet clay with short straw already mixed and is pulled to the crack. The mix has the look of bread dough and the feel of cool, slow earth in the hand. The straw gives it bridges, the sun gives it patience, the hands give it shape. The boy kneels with his knees wide so he will not leave a mark where water would try to rest. He pushes the clay into the crack with his thumb, then smooths it with a shell until the wall looks like itself again. The shell's curve leaves a surface that the wind cannot trouble. He lays a strip of damp cloth over the new clay to keep the sun from grabbing it too quickly. In a short while the cloth will lift, and the wall will be one piece. Repairs in these works are not speeches. They are sentences you write, and then do not need to read again. A small insect, something that likes hot light, buzzes toward the brine and then thinks better of the idea when its feet test the taste. A lizard with a tail like a thin rope darts between stones and stops where a patch of shade makes a crisp shape. Everything here works by balance, heat, and moving air, water, and patient tools, bodies, and their slow measures. The amphorae receive more of the day's quiet yield. The woman's brush writes new marks with steady wrist and small breath. Sometimes she adds a dot beneath the strokes to say third jar from this pan. She will understand it later the way one recognizes a friend's step. The red slip dries quickly on warm clay. The boy, pleased with the patch in the wall, brings a fresh cloth through the jar mouths when the time comes to seal. Warm wax learns the lip. The plug settles with a firm push, and a twist that would look like a seabird's neck if one were in the mood to make a picture of it. Heat climbs to its highest, then stands still as if it had forgotten what to do next. They answer with shade that moves a little, with water that tastes like nothing except relief, with motions that shed waste. No one rushes. Rushing in such hours turns work into work that needs doing twice. From the lane behind the store hut comes the even sound of a wagon whose wheels have been taught to be quiet. The driver is a broad man with a sun-brown beard and a hat whose brim is more idea than brim. He says hello with 2 fingers at his bra and steps down. The wagon carries a con load, new amphorae fanned like standing fish, their clayed bodies pale, their shoulders still showing the faint sand in which they were set to dry, a bundle of gate sticks with smooth, oiled ends, a coil of fresh rope that smells of hemp and salt, 2 reed screens rolled and tied, a sack of short straw for mixing into. Clay when the walls ask for it, a small jar of pitch, and a basket of figs under cloth because someone at home thought a day grows better if it remembers sweetness. They unload without changing the air. Amphorae come down one by one into soft beds of straw near the hut wall. The driver and the man check each lip with a thumb to be sure it will take a plug properly. The gate sticks are compared against the notches of the nearest basin. One is planed with a quick pass of a knife so it will sit as if it has always lived here. The new rope is uncoiled and passed through 2 hands to feel for knots that might have formed where it lay. There are none. The woman accepts the reed screens and leans them against the hut to learn the light. She pats the straw sack and sets it under the eave where it will stay dry and ready for any wall that wants a story told into its crack. The pitch jar is placed on a shelf where the warmth will keep it soft enough to answer, but not so soft that it forgets its shape. The fig basket comes last. The driver's wife sent a note he does not say aloud. It is woven into the cloth's neat corner and feels like kindness in the hands that untie it. Figs are passed around, each fruit opened with a thumb's pull so the red inside looks like a small map. The taste is honey and sun and a little seed crunch that speaks for good soil. The dog receives 1/2 with great seriousness and eats it lying down because that is the best way to honor a gift. The driver checks his wheel hubs with a pawn. He adds a thumb of grease where one hub wants to talk more than listen. He lifts his water skin, drinks, and sprinkles a little onto the wooden fellows the way some men sprinkle water on their hair before entering a room. It is more habit than need. He tips his hat fragment, collects a token of acknowledgment on a tally tablet from the store hut to marks for the amphorae, 1 for screens, 1 for rope, and sets the team to move. Who's go? The wagon fades to its low creak and a soft dust that cannot worry salt. Back at the far pans, a crust has thickened while the wagon stood. The paddle returns to its patient persuading flat, lift, slide, curl, rest. The motion is a metronome for the afternoon. The man's hand stays open on the paddle shaft, fingers loose, thumb along the grain. The boy tries a pass, and the plate obliges him, breaking in a friendly line that pleases both. He does not say anything. He offers the paddle back with 2 hands, which is a kind of speaking. In the near pans, where brine still wears more water than salt, the rake's work is the slow drawing of lanes so thin and regular that only the idea of cubes is there. But when he reaches the end of a pass and looks behind, the idea has become fact, faint squares that will be less faint by the next hour. This is the way of the day, many changes to small to point at in the moment, but clear when the sun has moved enough to lean the shadows in a new direction. A low piece of cloud drifts in from the sea and thinks about the pans while its shadow lowers the temperature of one path by the width of a foot. It moves on. The shadow's cool persists in the mind longer than it persists on the ground. The woman lifts the cloth from the repaired wall. The clay has set enough to be left to itself. She presses her palm gently against it as a mother checks a child's forehead. Warm? Yes. Sound? Yes. She smiles a little and moves on without words. The boy shakes the screen so that dust leaves it. He adjusts the angle to chase the shade one step along the plank where baskets and jars like to rest before being asked to carry weight again. The shade obeys because it was made to. The afternoon has found its tone, steady, neat, kind to tools, kind to backs. The light is still high, but it has softened half a thought. The sea beyond the works has taken on that metal-colored gets when the air above it has finished its lunch. There will be more salt before the sun lowers, and there will be the same motions again tomorrow. And the only way to tell one day from another will be a small crack mended here, a new jar marked there, a story the boy tries on the dog's ears at the end of work. This is the kind of difference that keeps work gentle. Salt waits in plates on the plank. Baskets wait with their mouths open. The rake leans for a breath but keeps its teeth ready. The gate sticks it easy and true. The sun looks over the shoulder of the hill and decides to begin thinking about evening, but not yet. The day chills. Light softens at the edges the way wool does when it's been worn and loved. Heat loosens its grip, and the air remembers how to move in longer breaths. Work shifts toward gathering and putting by. They begin with the pans farthest inland, those closest to finished. The man takes the rake again, not to draw lanes now, but to coax the last crystals toward the plank. The teeth skin just enough to lift without bruising. Small clusters slip together and travel, making a sound like dry grain through a patient funnel. The boy stands ready with the basket, angling it so the pieces settle across the bottom instead of mounting high at once. That keeps the weight kind to the back when he pulls the sledge. The woman visits each jar standing in shade near the store hut and presses her palms to the shoulders. Clay that has warmed all day should be warm in a way that feels alive, not hot in a way that threatens. Satisfied, she checks each plug by rolling a thumb over the seam where wax meets lip. A good seal feels like smooth bark. She leans her ear close habit, not necessity, and hears nothing but the hollow quiet of a vessel that is content. A breeze comes from the sea in long, even strokes. It brings a cleaner taste to the tongue, less brine, more sky. Loose ends respond, cord tails lift. The corner of a cloth wakes and flutters once. A reed on the screen clicks against its neighbor and then settles. The dog raises its head, blinks, and chooses a new patch of light. On the paths, footprints that were sharp at noon soften until they look like shadows of themselves. The boy takes a palm broom from the sledge and sweeps where growing piles of crystals, lifted and carried, had left a dusting. His strokes are long and unhurried. The broom sings a dry song against packed clay. Dust returns to where it will not trouble tomorrow's brine. At the near pans, those still with more water, the man checks the gate faces and reads the afternoon like a ledger. He nudges one stick down a notch to slow a feed that no longer needs haste. Another gate he closes with care, leaving a finger width for breath. Pans that will not be harvested before night should not be asked to rush at the end. A still surface greets dawn better than a hurried one. He pats a wall with the flat of his hand and feels coolness returning. Night is thinking about arriving. A last crust in a middle pan has reached the moment between fragile and firm that all three know by sight now. The paddle returns to persuade the sheet into plates. The woman watches the boy's second try and offers only a single word, flatter, which is enough. He eases the tool a finger height lower, and the crust rises in a larger piece that breaks neatly at the plank. He smiles with one corner of his mouth and does not look around to see if anyone noticed. They did, and no one makes a ceremony of it. Another pair of amphorae are filled. The scoop moves in a rhythm that no one learned from a teacher exactly. The hands built it by working. Pour, settle, pour, settle. When a jar has taken its share, the woman lifts her brush again and adds the day mark and the small dot that means evening draw. Later at the household that will use this salt, that dot will be a small pleasure, as if the jar carries a memory of the hour it was filled. The store hut is cooler now, a little cave made by straw pots and shadow. Inside, rows of amphorae stand in wedges so the rounded bodies support one another. Each base rests on two crossed laths to keep clay from learning damp. Between rows, little tablets of clay hold marks of what came in today. A pebble rests on each tablet to keep it from walking away in a gust. It is a harmless superstition, and a useful one. The driver of the wagon returns with an empty bed to carry filled jars to the larger shed near the road. He moves more slowly now, not from tiredness, but to give the team a gentler task after the push of the noon trip. The men lift jars two-handed, forearms crossed, lips toward the wagon's sideboards. The driver places straw collars, a ring that keeps jars from touching noses, and ties a rope loosely along the line so that small jolts will be shared by the whole, not taken alone. He checks the knots by eye and by habit. He always checks twice, and no one minds. While they load, the boy brings a little pot of warm water and a clean strip of cloth to wipe the scoop's lip on the rake's back. Salt will polish a tool, but a thin film can hide under a warm edge. A wipe now means an easier morning later. He also wets the palm broom just enough that the next passes will lay dust without raising it. Details are a kind of courtesy to tomorrow's hands. A low talk happens without leaning on any single sentence. Someone mentions that last year's late wind came 3 days earlier than this. Someone else answers that the reeds along the channel grew taller this spring, which often means the late wind naps before it works. The woman adds, half to herself, that the cord for pan 12 will need a new knot marker soon. The old knot has memorized too many days. The talk does not seek agreement, and it does not make a point. It simply keeps the company of the light. Now the breeze has turned the pages of the sky toward evening. A gull writes one soft curve and leaves. The sound from the shore slackens. Boats are either in or very far out. The sea looks hammered, then smooth again, then like poured metal with a line of pale fire where the sun decides to drift. Closing begins the way opening did, by touch and by sight. The man and the woman walk the perimeter together. Where a wall meets a channel, they press the corners with thumbs for softness that would signal a slow leak. None offer complaint. They lay a handful of pebbles on the edge of one gate so it will remember to stay seated. At a shallow, they stretch a net of string across two pegs. The mesh is simple, meant not for fish but for birds that might try a night footbath and undo an hour's quiet. Birds will go elsewhere when a line says, gently, not here. At the plank, they heel a pair of wedges under its legs so a straight push of wind will not turn it into a drum. The rake's handle gets wrapped in a strip of cloth to keep dew from settling into a crack where it once had a knot. The scoop is left on its side, lip inward, because that is how it prefers to sleep. The broom is hung from its hole so bristles will wake straight. The boy checks the cloth they used earlier on the repaired wall. He folds it, now dry and salt stiff, and hangs it near the clay trough. Tomorrow it will become a new strap for a basket, or a tie for a screen, or simply a rag that knows the pan's smell. He pours the last warm water from the small pot over his hands and rubs his fingers until the crystals that hid in the lines dissolve. He dries them on his tunic with an absent pad, and then rubs a drop of oil into the skin so it will not crack. The grown hands do the same without looking. They make a small heap of shells, reeds, and splinters gathered by the branch and broom during the afternoon. The heap will feed the morning fire. It is ordinary to end the day by beginning the next in a small way. In the store hut doorway, the woman lifts the strap of knotted cords and feels the day as weight and as story. She slides one knot along a span to a place that makes better sense, then ties a new small knot close to the old one for memory. She taps the clay tablet with her fingertip and lays the strap across it. Numbers do not need witnesses, but they like to sit where someone might greet them. The wagon rolls out with a soft rattle of straw. The driver raises his fingers without turning his head. The team's tails draw brief arcs. Dust follows and then settles almost immediately, as if it were polite. The road takes the jars toward a larger roof. The pans receive the sound and let it go. Dew thinks about coming, then decides to wait until the last of the heat has stepped away. The sea, not far, shifts its voice lower. The boy sits on the sledge a moment and chews a stalk of something he picked without noticing. It tastes green and plain. He spits the pale end into his palm and sets it on the path for a beetle to discover. He scratches the dog's shoulder, and the dog leans into the scratches as if into a strong wind. That is its way of saying thank you. One more walk around. One more hand on each gate, each tool, each jar waiting for tomorrow. The light has taken on the color of baked clay. The salt ridges left to dry overnight stand like little walls in a city designed by straight rulers. The man looks over the small white city and feels the kind of pride that never announces itself. Evening is here, not in a rush but as an understanding. The work has stepped back and left everything more itself. Dusk arrives as a quiet agreement. The sky keeps its blue but softens it with a little milk. The sea answers with a wide band of pewter. On the pads, the last useful light slips along the low walls and picks out the edges of the small white ridges like writing on a calm tablet. They take what is ready and leave what is not. The man and the boy walk side by side, one carrying the rake, the other the paddle. Where the crust is firm and the air still, the paddle persuades another plate to rise and break against the plank. Where the crystals are small and loose, the rake hums in short strokes to gather them into a final pour. The scoop makes a last, tidy arc, and the basket receives without protest. The work is no longer a push, it is a rounding of corners, a smoothing of lines. Wine eases down to a simple breath. With it comes the delicate smell of evening, the faint sweetness of drying reeds, the thread of smoke from some hearth beyond the dunes, the clean mineral note of brine cooling. The dog who knows these smells as a calendar stands and shakes once from nose to tail, then settles by the store hut door where company will soon be. Inside the store hut, the air holds the day's warmth with a comforting steadiness. Amphories stand in their ranks, shoulders painted with the red marks made earlier, dots and strokes quiet under the soft light. Between the rows, a clay lamp waits, its small wick dark and ready. The woman strikes a spark from flint and steel into tinder that has remembered fire many times before. The lamp accepts the flame and turns it into a small, even arc along the wick. At once the room grows friendly. Shadows step back to their places and make the jars look taller, more patient. She moves along the rows with the cord strap looped over one arm. Each new jar earns a touch on the shoulder and a brief murmured count that the strap answers with a small weight in the hand. On a low shelf, the clay tablets for the day's tally lie side by side, morning, noon, evening. She presses a thumb into the soft surface of the last tablet and draws one short line to close the set. The pebble goes back on top, a small, satisfied promise to remember. Back outside, the man checks the gates for night. Those that must remain open by a finger are set with two pebbles tucked at the heel, a trick that keeps a stick from moving when dew thinks about making things slippery. Where a pan surface shows the faintest film, he leaves it to the stars, knowing the dawn will find it ready for the first pass of the rake. He smooths a scar of today's footprints along a wall with the flat of his hand. The wall likes to meet the night without marks. The boy fetches the last of the warm water from the small pot and carries it in a careful gait that keeps the world from sloshing. He dips a cloth, wrings it tight, and wipes the tools one more time. Paddle face, rake back, scoop lip so they sleep clean. He lays them in their accustomed places on the sledge, handles pointing in the same direction like oars set for morning. He binds the broom bristles with a loop of twine so they will wake straight. He turns a basket over, shakes out a whisper of salt dust, and sets it to rest mouth down on a plank so night creatures will not audition it as a house. When the last basket of the day reaches the hut, the woman warms the cloth to soften the plug of a waiting jar, then seats it again with that familiar twist. The man takes the reed brush and, for this final jar, paints a small second dot below the house sign. Not a rule, just a habit that pleases him. It is a way of saying, this one came in at the gentlest hour. The mark dries quickly and becomes part of the jar's memory. They sit not to celebrate, just to sit. The plank that was a workbench becomes a bench for bodies. Bread comes out from beneath cloth, its crust firm but yielding. A small dish of oil glows in the lamplight. The boy pinches salt from a little heap their own and rubs it into the oil with a fingertip until the surface turns cloudy and inviting. They dip. The bread carries rosemary and the day's patient hunger. A wedge of cheese is cut, shared, and gone in quiet bites. Someone produces 3 figs saved from the wagoner's basket. They are opened with thumbs again, The red within looks deeper in lamplight, like coals with sugar instead of fire. There is talk, but it is the kind that respects night. A remark about a cloud shape over the western hill. A thought about replacing the chord on pen 7's tally before it frays. A memory of a winter with light feet, when the pan slept more than they worked. The boy listens more than he speaks, and learns a measure that is not quite counting, not quite weather, but both. The lamp on its stone base makes a soft ticking as a bubble of air moves through the oil and finds the wick. Its flame holds steady, the size of a fingernail, enough to make everything near it show its edges, and everything far away become kind. Moths come and go. One tests the air above the lamp, feels the heat, and circles away, finding interest instead in the reed screen where it can trace patterns without consequence. They rise when rising feels like the next right thing. The woman pinches the lamp's wick down with a dampened forefinger and leaves it to a thin glow that fades in a patient spiral. The clay retains a little warmth the way a hand retains the feel of a tool. She sets the lamp in the doorway, not for light now, but because it looks at home there. One last walk around happens almost without steps. The pans, silver in the low sky, hold their lines. The gate sticks it as they were asked to. The repaired wall shows no dark seam. The plank is wedged, the scoop turned in, the rake wrapped. The sledge rests, strapped with its load of tools. The store hut's door leans shut with a soft sound that the dog recognizes as meaning enough. They turn toward the footpath that will take them to small houses with low windows and walls that remember the day's warmth. The boy carries the empty water skin, feeling proud of its likeness, as if he had done a special thing to make it so. The man lifts the bundle of cloths and sets it on his shoulder, where it knows the quiet place to ride. The woman loops the cord strap over a peg inside the hut and closes the latch with a movement as smooth as the stroke of her brush. The sea speaks in a lower voice now, a voice it keeps for those willing to listen after work. Far out, the single point of late light shows where someone has business under a sky that has already forgiven everyone. A bird crosses that point and disappears into the charcoal blue. They do not say good night. The path says it for them. The soft crush of salt grass, the whisper of sand, the small stones that click and then settle. The dog goes ahead a few paces and stops, turns, waits, then goes again. The last color leaves the pans and becomes the first stars. The place is left as it should be for sleep, tools resting, numbers remembered, walls smooth, water calmed. The day has turned itself to evening and asked nothing loud of anyone. We close the door on the salt and open another on something finer than grain. In another country, at another hour, a small charcoal ember warms a tiny bowl, and fragrance becomes a language spoken in a wooden room of paper and lacquer. From white crystals and soft wind we step into Heian Kyoto, where a quiet ember and careful hands teach incense to say its name in gentle breaths. The wooden room wakes before voices. Light arrives as a pale square on the paper screens and spreads like milk and tea. Tatami give a dry sigh under careful feet. On a low table, small mounds sit in neat order. A losewood shavings dark as river bark. A pinch of clove, a breath of camphor, fine shell powder with a chalk-soft gleam. A bronze censer waits with its lid half open, ashen side combed to a quiet rippled field. Whenever you're ready to imagine the room, think of slow hands and lighter air. Think of fragrance as a way to speak. In this house, Scent is a letter, a season, a reply to the moon. People listen to incense rather than burn it. They warm a crumb and pay attention to the story it chooses to tell. An attendant folds back his sleeves. Silk whispers. He lifts a cedar box and slides off its lid with the heel of a palm so the sound is a soft breath, not a click. From the box he takes a small packet wrapped in washi and tied with a narrow silk thread. It holds a favored wood chip. He sets it beside the censer as one might set a book by a lamp. Ash needs shaping before any ember is welcomed. He tips a scoop, pours gray ash into the censer, and uses a bamboo tool like a tiny rake to smooth it into a shallow hill and a small valley. This shape guides are the way a garden stone guides water. A feather whisk finishes the surface. Its touch too light to leave marks you can see, but enough to teach the ash to lie in peace. Charcoal is not set blazing. It is coaxed. He selects 3 little pieces from a clay jar charcoal prepared days ago and kept dry. One piece is kindled outside the censer. The glow is the size of a cherry. He buries that glow beneath the ash so heat rises like a secret. He places a thin mica plate transparent and delicate above the warm spot. This sheet, no thicker than a dragonfly's wing, will carry fragrance without scorch. The lid settles, and the censer begins its small work. A warmth gathers, not a flame. The room inhales. A lacquered tray holds the mixing things. There is a tiny brass spoon with a flat nose, a sliver of horn for lifting the lightest grains, a spatula carved from bamboo, and a mortar no bigger than a cupped hand. The pestle is plumwood, rubbed smooth by ears. He draws the tray nearer, and each tool makes a mild click where it greets the wood of the table. A brush and inkstone stand off to the side for records. Formulas are brief, sometimes only a poem's title and 3 dots, but the hand that writes is steady and remembers. He warms the first wood on the mica. A shaving no larger than a grain of rice sits there, and after a while the air on it changes. Not smoke, a breath. Deep, resin soft, with a shadow of sweetness that folds over itself and lingers. He lowers a folded fan and directs a wisp toward his nose. He does not hurry the breath. He lets it arrive and settle. He is not trying to decide if it is good. He is learning what kind of good it wishes to be. This practice listening to incense grew inside the court the way moss grows on a shaded stone. People gather to play scent games in winter evenings, comparing notes, naming what they sense by the names of far-off islands, mountain rains, pine after snow. In letters, a sachet's trace tells more than ink. A robe keeps its memories in its hem. Today's blends will serve small sachets for sleeves and boxes for paper, and a recipe or 2 for a future game. He tests camphor necks, only a crystal's corner. The air brightens, like silk newly washed in winter water, a little medicinal, a little cool. He sets the impression aside in his head and touches clove to the mica, different story, round and warm, like a cupboard that held fruit last month. These will not go in as they are. They will be ground, sifted, and tamed by ash and shell so that nothing shouts. While the censer keeps its secret warmth, he prepares the notebook slip. The brush drinks a little water, greets the inkstone, and wakes the black with slow circles. He writes the day, the hour, and the weather in a narrow line. South breeze. Light. He leaves space for the recipe's small bones. The characters look at ease on the paper, as if they were chosen for rest. A second attendant brings tea. Cups are thin and pale. Steam stands just above them, and then forgets to. The tea tastes of grass and a bare touch of smoke, and it steadies the tongue, which will help with smelling. Nearby, a chest with small drawers sits against the wall. Each drawer is labeled plum bark, sandalwood, clove, star anise, musk, ground shell. When he slides a drawer, he moves it only as far as needed, so dust does not learn to travel. He weighs nothing on a scale. He weighs with the eye and with ears. A pinch of aloes wood shavings goes to the mortar. A flake of clove follows, then a whisper of camphor, just enough to lift but not to lead. He adds ground shell and a thought of musk, which is more a memory than a measure. The pestle turns in slow circles. The sound is like paper being folded softly. Powder forms, the grains finer than sand, not as fine as flour. He lifts the mortar and breathes the top of the bowl without putting his nose too close. It is not finished, but it has decided on its path. For sachets, the powder must learn to live with other things. He measures rice flour, a little honey water, and a breath of plum. This will let the ball keep its scent for months, releasing a polite hello whenever sleeve or paper moves. He kneads the mix with the spoon's backside in a small dish. It gathers to a single pale mass that holds together. He will shape it later and wrap it in silk or paper stamped with a small cloud. Now he returns to the mica plate. He places a pinhead of the blend on the warm sheet. Again, not smoke. A woven thread of notes. The aloes wood's depth sits at the center, the clove's roundness rides above it, and the camphor keeps a small window open. He wafts it once with the folded fan. The room seems to grow a careful border, like a garden where stones and moss have learned each other's names. He writes 3 characters for the blend's working name. It might be evening rain or snipe wing, or a line borrowed from a poem. Names in this room are lids. They keep the idea from spilling. A side task begins. He opens a small long box and removes paths of thin, undecorated paper. These are 4 letter wrappers. Each will be kept in a shallow tray over the censer, not to perfume heavily, only to remember where they slept. He arranges 8 sheets, corners aligned to a quiet square, and sets the tray onto ceramic pegs above the censer's lid. Heat rises, meets the paper, and turns their plainness into a promise. Through the screen a garden shows pieces of itself, moss that looks like a very small forest, a stone with a shadow like a sleeping cat, a basin the size of a wide bowl. Somewhere beyond, a bell counts a time that this room does not need. He adjusts the lid a breath to the left. The ash field listens and keeps each ember where it should stay. He tests one more element, a shaving of sandalwood. It is gentle, almost creamy. He decides to leave it for a different task. This blend is better as it is deep, round, with a clean edge. He covers the sandalwood again and returns it to its drawer. Lids close softly, as if each drawer prefers to be asleep. When he is satisfied the first recipe holds, he draws the brush across the slip once more and marks the ratios with small dots and short strokes. No one outside this craft could make sense of it. That is fine. The record speaks to the hand that wrote it and the nose that stood here. By late morning, the room has no smoke. It has presence. If you stepped in from the corridor, you might say, quiet, though you would mean scent. On the table, the mortar is clean, the pestle rests across the rim, the mica gleams like a lake seen through ice. Outside, footsteps pass. A servant takes laundry toward the garden line. Soap flutters, and then agrees to hang still. Inside, the censer goes on like a heart that does not need applause. By late morning, the ash needs tending again. Ash does not look alive, yet it behaves like a small landscape that enjoys careful weather. The attendant lifts the censer lid with 2 fingers and rests it against a porcelain stand so the metal will not surprise the table. The ash field still shows the ripples he combed at dawn, but their edges have softened, and the hidden ember has wandered a finger's width under its coat. He takes the bamboo rake and redraws the gentle ridges. From the center, he makes a tiny hill and a low valley beside it, then traces a narrow path where air may walk. A feather whisk finishes the surface until it looks like winter sand under a quiet tide. He sets the mica back over the warm place, only a breath to the left, so new notes won't sit on the ghost of the old. This care moving the plate a finger width, renewing small ridges keeps heat steady and the room patient. Second trials begin. He pinches the earlier blend between thumb and forefinger, just enough powder to look like a seed, then lays it on the mica. The breath rises again, round and deep, but he suspects that camphor could be 1 grain less. He notes this with a dot on the slip and reaches for the mortar. Grinding is not a forceful act. He rolls the pestle as if smoothing a wrinkle from silk. A losewood clove and a hush of musk meet again, shell softens the edges. He shows restraint with camphor this time, now only a suggestion, a window ajar rather than open. A pinhead goes to the mica. The room answers with a chord that is nearly the same as before, but with more space inside it, like a garden path widened by half a sandal width. He marks a tiny stroke on the slip and lets the blend rest. He prepares a second recipe for comparison. This one asked for sandalwood to introduce a gentle cream note and a whisper of star anise, nothing that would announce itself, only a curve along the rim. The pestle turns, the powder learns its single color, and the mica receives a dot. The scent stands lighter, with a soft brightness at the top. It feels like a partly cloudy day written in fragrance. He does not prefer it yet. He simply learns it. A small wooden tray appears for sachet work. On it lie a rice flour, honeyed water cooled to room warmth, and a drop of plum. A scrap of raw silk waits for wrapping. He tips the first blend into a porcelain dish, adds a spoon edge of rice flour and a smear of honey water, and presses the mixture with the spoon's back until it gathers like obedient clay. Kneaded incense works this way. It is meant to live a long time, to open slowly in a sleeve or a document box. He divides the mass into 5 small pearls and rolls each between his palms. They come away with the faintest sheen, the way a pebble looks when the stream has loved it. He sets the pearls on a cedar board, spaced like stars, that agree not to crowd one another. He shapes the second blend as well, but into flatter tablets that will dry a little faster and suit a sachet meant for paper drawers rather than clothing. He presses each tablet against a tiny stamp carved with a simple cloud. The mark is not necessary. It is a courtesy for fingers that will find it months later. He lifts the first pearl to his nose, but not too close. Even now restraint is a companion. The kneading has softened the blend's edges, knit the notes, made the whole more conversational. He smiles not with mouth, but with the shoulders, which lower on their own. He rests the pearl again, and breathes the bare trace it leaves in the air. In this period, robes take on such traces like polite memories. A sleeve holds a season the way a pond holds a reflection quietly, and without argument. He reaches for the brush to record the two recipes with better names. Names matter in this room because they carry weather, time, and mood in a small handful of sound. He considers self-breeze for the first blend, then decides it is to open. He writes 3 characters that mean evening edge, a border between light and not light, warm and cool. For the second, he borrows from a poem about a white heron lifting from reeds. The characters sit like 2 birds and a stem. A little space remains on the slip for a later revision. Names, like scents, can change with the day. The ash field asks again for attention. He lifts the mica, draws 1 extra ridge, and smooths the path. This patterning has a rhythm of its own. Comb, lift, whisk, place like calligraphy without ink. If the ember grows to forward, he buries it for a little while so that heat will remember to be kind. In formal gatherings of the court, such tending would be done with ceremony. Here, in a workroom, it is done with the same grace, only quieter. He tests how the scent behaves with paper. He takes a letter sheet from the tray warmed above the censer and folds it once, twice, then opens it. He leaves a tablet of the second blend at the center and closes the sheet around it briefly, not to perfume strongly, only to give the paper a path back to this room later. He removes the tablet, sets it among its sisters, and lifts the sheet to his face. It holds the faintest outline of the mix, like a memory you can almost retrieve without ever fully catching. In this place and time, a letter often arrives smelling like where it slept. It can say plum viewed by moon without a single character. A friend will understand. Sachets are tied necks. He cuts squares of silk, each the size of a small palm, places a pearl at the center, gathers the corners, and twists once, then twice. A silk thread secures the neck. He ties a simple knot that rests flat so it will not print in a sleeve. He rubs a drop of oil into the threads and to tame stray fibers. These sachets will live in robe hems or sit tucked behind a fan. When moved, they will breathe as quietly as the censer does now. He pauses to drink tea. The second attendant has refreshed the pot without remark. Steam wanders up and loses interest half a hand from the cup. He looks to the paper screens where garden green makes its suggestion. Somewhere nearby, a brush washes in a bowl. You can hear the soft clicks as old ink leaves its hair. The house is a set of patient sounds. A third blend occurs to him unasked, a winter thought to counter the 2 spring-sounding notes. He opens the drawer of cinnamon and takes the smallest trace. He pairs it with a fuller losewood shaving and a shade more shell to soften warmth into comfort rather than spice. The mortar learns the new language. On the mica, the dot speaks of a wooden corridor at night, heated stones in a brazier, robes dried in the same room as books. He writes a working name, quiet hearth, and leaves space to erase it later if the afternoon disagrees. He shapes only 2 pearls of this winter blend and tucks them in a small covered jar with a few grains of roasted salt to keep their temper. They will travel to the main chest for aging. Kneaded incense prefers time. It ripens like fruit stored in shade. In the Heian court, patience is part of the craft. Ink rests before letters. Silk rests between dyings. Scent rests before it earns a sleeve. He cleans tools as he works, returning each to its trade place so hands can find them by habit, not by search. The mica receives a wipe with soft paper. The rake is brushed free of ash. The feather whisk sleeps with its quill resting on a folded cloth. This is how a quiet room stays quiet. By midday the slips hold 3 neat names, the board holds 9 small forms, and the air holds something you could call afternoon if scent could keep a clock. The censer hums. The ash field rests in its careful pattern. The doors are still, but nothing feels closed. Footsteps hesitate in the corridor, soft as sleeves. The paper screen lifts a finger's width. A voice announces to visitors with the sort of courtesy that feels like a bow even if you cannot see it. The attendant answers with a word that means welcome and readiness at once. Sandals are set neatly at the threshold, toes aligned. Inside, the room does not change its mind, it simply makes a little more space. The guests enter with small nods, one elder, one younger. Both carry the weather on their robes, a trace of sunlight and garden damp. They settle on the tatami opposite the low table. Sleeves fold like quiet water. A tray with cups returns, and Steen writes a pale script between faces without trying to be read. Today, they will listen for a little while. Not a contest, only a practice, the way friends might watch clouds and say what they resemble. The censer is placed between them, a little closer to the elder. The lid comes off and rests against its porcelain stand. The ash field shows its ripples. The hidden ember warms the mica without hurry. The host chooses a wood chip scarcely larger than a sesame seed and places it on the plate. There is no smoke, only a rising thread you could almost miss if you were thinking of something else. The elder lifts a folded fan and brings the air toward his nose once, and then again with more patience. He does not search for a name, he lets the scent speak first. After a long breath he murmurs, "Sure after rain," and smiles at the younger guest as if sharing a familiar path. The younger listens next. His first breath finds the resin's depth. His second catches a clean edge that was not there until the air met it. He offers a quiet picture instead of a word. A boat rope rinsed and left on stone. The host inclines his head. He notes each phrase on a slender slip with 3 brief characters and a dot. In this room, descriptions are not judged, they are kept, the way a garden keeps footprints until wind erases them kindly. A second chip follows, this one from a different corner of the chest. It speaks lighter, a little sweeter, as though the tree lived farther south. The elder says, "First heat in spring," and then, a moment later, a lacquer box opened. The younger simply laughs in the soft way that means he recognizes something from his robe hems last year. The host writes again. He adds a small circle beside the elder's remark, his sign for phrases that might become names. It is common to take notes this way. Over seasons, a ledger of scent grows. Fragments of wood, words that visited, weather that stood outside the screen. Some volumes belong to households, some to craftsmen. This one sits in a cedar cover, its pages fastened with silk cord through 4 holes, so sheets lie flat and quiet. The first pages remember winter blends, words for hearth, cloth dried at night, corridors that stored warmth the way bowls store water. The next pages lean toward plum and thaw. Today will join spring's gentle column. Between trials, paper wrappers are perfumed for letters. The host lifts the thin tray kept above the censer and turns each sheet with careful fingers. He has given them a hint of presence that is noticeable only when they move. He refills the tray with 8 fresh sheets and sets it back on the ceramic pegs. One guest watches with clear interest the small mechanics of fragrance, the way a room teaches paper without marking it. A sachet is offered to each guest to rest in a sleeve while they talk. The pearls were made earlier from the first blend. Cloth corners gather, a silk thread ties flat, and a knot lands where it will not bruise the fabric. The elder presses his sachet at the wrist and lets out a breath that might be gratitude. The younger slips his into the fold of his fan as if tucking in a thought. They play a gentle guessing game, not to win, but to hear how words travel between people. The host warms a tiny dot of the second blend, the one with sandalwood's soft cream, and asks only for a season. The elder says late spring, the younger says a day that doesn't choose. Both are true. The host writes between and leaves it unclaimed, a doorway for later. Tea arrives again. The cups are set so the rims face the guests, and each bowl's quiet pattern turns like a small moon. A bit of sweetie is offered, a pressed rice cake with a faint plum taste. Sweetness steadies noses and tongues for the next breath. The censer's ember asked for new air. The attendant draws a narrow path in the ash, lifts the mica, and settles at a whisper to the right. The ash field looks newly coned, the ember keeps its temper. Now the host introduces quiet hearth, the winter thought. He says nothing. The dot warms. The room receives a roundness that feels like distance turning friendly. The elder closes his eyes for a heartbeat and nods. The younger says, the sleeve of a robe that slept near books. The host's brush adds to small marks in the ledger to remember who said what. He has learned that people carry seasons they do not name, and their phrases remember them. A small tray of record slips is placed near the guests. Each writes a name for the day's first blend. The elder chooses characters that mean evening edge, only he writes them with a different hand, making the line thinner, the pause longer. The younger chooses rain under eaves. The host will keep these slips with the recipes. Years from now, he may open the cedar box and lift these lines like dried leaves from between pages. The ledger grows one more column, a list of who received sachets and where those sachets will live. Sleeve, fan, paper, chest. This is not a requirement. It is a kindness to the future, when someone will wonder why a letter smells like a remembered day. He writes the weather again, south breeze. Light, and draws a short line beneath it, the way a reader closes a chapter. One guest produces a small parcel as a gift to Losewood from a cousin who traveled. The host opens it only enough to see, not to disturb its sleep. He adds a line to the ledger with the wood's likely origin and a note. Save for winter games, it will rest weeks, perhaps months, before meeting ash. Scent, like ink and silk, benefits from not being asked to hurry. The younger guest speaks about a poem he copied the night before, and how the ink smelled faintly of acacia. The host nods. In this world, materials share rooms. Paper sleeps near scent. Ink sleeps near cedar. Robes sleep near drawers that hold summer. Smells do not compete. They learn to stand together like words in a good line. As the hour leans past noon, the listening ends without ending. It drifts to silence the way a bell's ring becomes air again. The host pinches the ember deeper into the ash soap, but will rest. The lid returns. The room's presence remains, but it no longer asked for attention. Gifts go back and forth, as is proper to sachets for the elder to carry to a sister, one tablet for the younger to keep with brushes. Paper wrappers cooled above the censer are folded around a pair of letters that will travel this afternoon. The seal paste opens, receives a ring, and closes again with a quiet cap. A small lacquer tag is tied to the packet with a loop that will not snag. At the threshold, sandals wait as they were left. The guests bow. The air moves. The corridor takes them. The room returns to its earliest size, which is not smaller, only different. The attendant titties without sound. Mortar wiped. Pestle laid crosswise. Drawers closed enough to sleep. The ledger page dries, its ink settling to a soft black. The ash field rests, patterns intact, warm sleeping like a cat beneath a quilt of gray. In the courtyard, the basin reflects the sky and the leaf that considers falling. A breeze steps through the screen and lifts a corner of paper, then thinks better of it. Afternoon turns its face toward later. Late day arrives like a soft hand on the shoulder. Light on the paper screens warms and thins. The floor accepts longer shadows. Work does not stop. It settles into tasks that prefer quiet. The host begins with wrapping. The pearls formed earlier have firmed the livel. He tests one with a fingertip. It yields, then holds its shape. Good? He cuts narrow strips of silk from a bolt kept for this purpose, the weave simple and even. Each strip becomes a wrap for a single pearl. He lays the cloth square, places the pearl at the center, folds corner to corner, then tucks the ends under, making a small parcel that will not press a crease into a sleeve. A silk thread ties once, twice. The knot lies flat. He smooths the tail with a damp finger so threads do not wander. Some pearls will rest longer before use. Aging lends depth. For those, he chooses mulberry paper. It breathes more than silk and keeps company with cedar. He writes the blend's name at one edge of each sheet, evening edge, between quiet hearth, using a brush no wider than a reed slip. The characters are small but unhurried. He wraps 2 pearls per packet and adds a pinch of roasted salt to a covered jar to steady the air. The jar closes with a clay lid that has learned this motion and makes a soft click that sounds like a scent. He opens the cedar chest that serves clothing. Its interior smells of wood and a memory of last winter's robes. The rails hold folded garments resting like careful clouds. He does not perfume them much. He only offers them a path back to the room. He slips a wrapped pearl into the seam of a robe intended for evening use, and one into the layered collar set aside for a coming visit. He places a fresh tablet of the lighter blend in a small open dish on the chest's lowest shelf. The dish is porcelain, shaped like a leaf. It will not overwhelm. It will only remind the rogues that they share a house with ash and wood. Next, he tends the letter chest. It is shallower, lined with plain paper and cedar slips. A tray holds folded wrappers warmed above the censer earlier. He sets the tray inside and slides a sachet into the corner behind the tray. Letters will lie down here tonight and wake with a hint of place. On the chest's lid, he ties a narrow tag with the day's blends written in tiny script. The tag will stay until the scent fades. Then it will go to the ledger as a leaf saved from a season. Sachets for sleeves and fans are gathered into a small basket. He counts quietly. 2 for household robes. 3 for upcoming gifts. 1 for the writing box. 1 for the brush rack. He nests them with strips of soft cloth so they will not bruise one another. The basket's handle is wrapped in silk to keep fingers from marking the weave. When the basket is moved, it makes no sound. The censor asked for attention again. Heat is a good servant, but it enjoys company. The attendant lifts the lid and reads the ash. Ridges remain, though they have softened at the peaks. He takes the rake and redraws the pattern. A small hill at the center, a valley beside it. A narrow path for air. The feather whisk smooths the rest. He slides the mica to the cooler side and places 1 dot of the first blend to check how the room is doing. The breath rises, gentle and complete. He nods. Then he buries the ember for a short rest. Ash folds over warmth like a blanket, and the heat answers by becoming a memory instead of a request. The host cleans tools in the order they served. Mortar and pestle receive a soft cloth. No water touches them, only powder leaves. The spoon is wiped, then wiped again until it shines a little. The horn sliver returns to its place in the tray with its edge wrapped in paper so it will not nick anything. The mica plate is lifted to the window where the remaining warmth leaves it. He looks through it at the garden, most darkening, a single leaf turning its face to evening. The plate goes back to its paper sleeve. He loosens the brush hairs in clean water and presses them to the bowl's rim with slow turns, then shapes the point on paper. The brush sleeps bristles up in the rack with others, each one with its own small history of letters and lists. The inkstone is wiped with a damp cloth and then dried. It prefers to be lightly oiled now and then. Today is not that day. He returns it to the writing box and turns the latch that keeps lids from wandering. Perfuming robes can be done by smoke, but this house prefers warmth without flame. He takes a shallow clay cup, fills it with white ash from a box kept for this, and nests a finger-sized coal inside. He waits until the coal is only a red thought, and then buries it. A new mica plate rests on top. Over this, he lays a folded sleeve for a short time, and lifts it away before the cloth notices heat. The sleeve will hold a breath of wood like a poem line that you hear only when no one speaks. He turns the sleeve, repeats, waits, and stops when enough has become enough. For a friend who likes to keep a faint scent with brushes, he prepares a thin cord sachet. He ties a pearl in a narrow tube of silk, stitches it shut with 3 small passes of thread, and leaves a longer tail. This tail will tie around a brush handle near the ferrule, where it will not tangle with hair. He writes a note on a slip to characters for winter and lays it near the basket of prepared gifts. He attends to the ledger. The brush wakes again, drinks a little ink, and draws a clean line beneath the day's earlier notes. He lists the stored packets by name and count. He notes where sachets were placed: drogue chest, letter chest, brush rack. He writes the visitors' names with the characters they used for the blends. He adds weather again, because weather holds hands with scent. Breeze weaker, light long. The page dries while he watches it turn dull from shine. He weaves the page corners with smooth stones while the ink finds rest. Afternoon leans toward evening. A bell far away remarks on it. He answers by folding the workroom back into a place that holds, rather than does. Drawers close with their soft half-click. The cedar chest's doors meet with a quiet kiss. The small porcelain dish stays open in the letter chest, but the lid comes down so the room remains the main speaker. The attendant returns with a tray to collect ash from earlier trials. Not everything returns to the chest. Some ash is kept for future blending. It remembers notes like a friend remembers paths. He tips the ash through a fine sieve, tapping lightly until only the softest powder falls to a waiting bowl. Larger crumbs spent wood, cool charcoal stay behind and go to a pottery jar for disposal. The sifted ash will become tomorrow's field, rippled, guided, calm. The room itself is given a gentle perfume, not by burning, by moving air. The host lifts a folded fan and stirs the corner by the screen, then the space near the chest, then the space above the censer stand. The motion is slow, like breathing talk to a child. The room answers with a faint return of the morning's first wood, the afternoon's blends, and something the day made by adding them all together. Before he closes the censer for the day, he allows one last dot of the winter blend to warm, only to honor the quiet. The scent rises like a small bowl. He buries the ember fully, levels the ash flat with the rake, smooths with the feather whisk, and sets the lid on the censer a little askew so any remaining warmth can wander out without fuss. He washes his hands in a shallow basin. The water is cool and tastes of well and stone. He dries them on a linen cloth that remembers past days of the same act. The cloth hangs back on its peg. The peg sits exactly where the hand expects it. The work is finished, yet nothing in the room looks done. It looks ready. Pearls rest. Packets sleep. Paper holds its breath. The ledger keeps its place under a smooth stone. The air is not scented, it is settled. Through the screen, the sky dims to a gentle gray blue, and night insect begins a thin song in the garden. A bamboo drip in the basin ticks once, and then keeps its rhythm. The house listens. The room listens with it. Evening steps into the room without asking for light. The paper screens turn the sky into a mild gray blue. The garden gives back only its nearest stones. Everything becomes rounder and quieter, like speech wrapped in cloth. The host begins to close the day. He reaches for the cedar chest where finished packets and notes have gathered. The lid lifts with a soft hush. Inside, small bundles lie in neat rows. He sorts them by blend and use. Sachets for sleeves to one side, tablets for paper drawers to another. Pearls still ripening in their mulberry wraps to the back where shade sits longest. He nests thin cedar slips between layers so air can walk slowly. The lid returns to place, meeting the box with a touch that sounds like agreement. A narrow tray for gifts is brought out. It is black lacquer with a red edge that looks like a smile. He lines the tray with plain paper, places two sachets marked for the older visitor, and sets a single cord sachet with the thread tail coiled for the younger. Each parcel receives a small paper tag, no bigger than a thumb joint, with the blend's name and a date. He ties the tags with silk that matches, nothing in particular. Matching would call attention. He prefers that gifts feel as if they always belong to the hands that will take them. He opens the letter chest one last time. The tray of wrappers warm from earlier sits calm. He slips two sheets into a shallow sleeve box and lays a sachet under its floor. He writes a small note for autumn letters and slides it beneath the top layer. The chest's lid comes down with its small wooden catch. He touches the lid once, not to push it firmer, only to tell it the day's over. Next, He tends the censer for sleep. He removes the lid and looks at the ash. The field shows the morning's ripples softened by time. He lifts the rake and levels the surface to a gentle plain. No hill, no path, just rest. With the feather whisk he smooths the top until the ash looks like a brushed page. He pinches out any lingering red under the surface and adds a breath more ash to cool the bed. The mica plate, clean and dry, returns to its sleeve. The censer's lid tilts a fraction so any whisper of warmth can stray without asking permission. Coal and charcoal have their own end of day work. He opens a jar where spent pieces sleep. He lays today's cooled bits among them. A few sound like tiny shells as they meet. The jar's lid closes. The sound is small and right. A second jar holds tomorrow's charcoal, cut earlier, dried for weeks. He checks a piece with his fingers. It is light and tight. He sets the jar where the air is dry and steady. The mortar receives a final wipe. He folds a cloth into a soft square and cradles the bowl as he cleans. He paints the rim with a touch of sesame oil on his fingertip. The wood pestle gets a whisper of oil as well. Tools like to be remembered this way. They answer with long lives and better tempers. The brass spoon rests on its tray corner, bright enough to acknowledge light but not ask for it. He attends to the ledger. The brush bristles are awake again, shaped to a fine point. He writes a last line for the day. Package sachets, 8. Placed, robe chest, letter chest, brush rack. Discs prepared, 3. He adds the smallest note about the ash, field leveled. Mica cooled, then a weather line, air still. Evening mild. He sets the brush down, bristles up. He weighs the page with two smooth stones, their weight learned by long use. When the ink loses its shine, he threads the silk cord through the ledger's corner and ties a loose knot. Not closing, only keeping. The room now asked for soft air. He opens the screen a hand's width. Garden cool comes in carrying the smell of moss and water. Somewhere, a bamboo drip ticks into a stone basin. Night insects begin a steady song that does not insist. The paper of the screens moves a little and then decides to be still. He checks the robe for evening. It hangs on a low rail by the screen, sleeves laid neatly. He tucks a light sachet into the inner fold near the collar, where warmth from skin will wake it gently. He smooths the cloth once with a flat palm. The robe answers by falling into its own lines. A belt rests coiled on a tray, soft with long use. He lifts it, checks the stitch on its edge, and lays it down again so the twist will not remember itself wrong. At the sleeping platform, bedding waits. A cotton layer lies flat. A thin cover has been folded to the side. He takes one tablet of the lighter blend and places it in a small open dish near the pillow, not under, not hidden. He does not want a face to find a scent too close. He wants it to be the air itself, only a little kinder. He sets the dish on a wooden stand and turns it so the shallow cloud shape looks toward the room. The tablet will make no mark. It will suggest a place. A writing box sits near the bed. He opens it and breathes the faint odor of ink paper and cedar. He slides one scented wrapper into the bottom, under the paper sheets. He rests the brush on its support and turns the inkstone so its darker corner faces the back. He closes the lid. The latch falls with a quiet, satisfied clink. The house learns night. In the corridor, a lamp is turned low. Its paper shade gives off a pale, steady glow. The lamp's oil is checked. The wick is trimmed to a thin smile. A screen door a few rooms away finds its peg and stops moving. Voices in the distance settle into almost silence. The kitchen's last bowl is turned upside down. The garden stops showing colors and shows only shapes. He returns to the workroom once more to look at what it is now that nothing asks to be done. The low table stands cleared except for the ledger, the tray of tools, and the small stone that holds the brush stands steady. The censer rests with its lid in place, its shape like a calm full moon. The cedar chest is closed. The letter chest is closed. The baskets are empty or covered. The air is balanced with below paper round a held memory of a loose wood, a faint sweetness at the edge where the winter blend had spoken. If you stood here with eyes closed, you could tell the time without seeing the sky. He bows to the room. It is not a ceremony. It is a habit of gratitude. He lowers his head, exhales, and raises his eyes. He slides the screen to nearly closed, leaving a small opening so the room can trade breath with the night. The last thing his hand does is adjust the tray by a finger's width so it sits square to the mat edge. Order is a pillow for the mind. He steps into the corridor. The tatami take his footfalls, as if they were part of the floor's own thought. He carries the tray of gifts under one arm. A servant will deliver them in the morning, when roads are polite and shops lift their shutters. He leaves the workroom door as it is. A faint ribbon of scent goes with him, not enough to claim space, only enough to teach the corridor that a day has been finished. The night becomes itself. A far bell makes a line across the city and then leaves. The basin ticks. A moth touches the screen once like a single note, then forgets to come again. The house is not full, it is complete. In the workroom, the small tablet at the bedside begins its mild work, and the robe near the screen learns the cooler air. The ledger dries its final characters. The cedar shelves hold their patience. The scent in the room will not travel far. It will sit and accompany sleep like a quiet friend. From a distant market, a wind carries something different, a dust-dry hint of shells and rope, of palm mat and roasted yen. Far to the west, under a woven awning, hands count by tens and twenties while a wooden scale listens. And as the last breath of wood settles back into ash, we step into shade and warm air, to a stall in ore where cowries turn into numbers, and a day's work is measured by the gentle weight of shells. Before the heat is a thought, the market shade is already awake. Palm ribs make a roof that filters light into soft squares. A mat lies flat beneath a wooden crossbar. From that crossbar hangs a bean scale that knows its work. The weigher arrives with a basket under one arm and a short stick tucked into his belt. Sand clings to the mat's edge where yesterday ended. He smooths it with a palm, then sits with knees easy and breath calm. He greets the stall to his left. Kola nuts sit there, nested in leaves. He greets the stall to his right. Strips of cloth rest in tidy folds like river water paused. The market greets him back the way a room does when you open the door. Nothing loud. A feeling that you can begin. He opens his basket. Inside are small things that make work steady. A split calabash spoon, a gourd weight polished by hands, a handful of cut sticks for marks, a reed pen, and a shallow dish that will hold soot-black ink when the sun grows taller. He wipes the bean scales pans with a cloth as old as the job. Wood likes to feel remembered. The pans answer by sitting level. Cowries wait in a sack beside the mat. When he unties the neck, the shells whisper as they pour, dry and quick. He sifts them with the calabash. Broken ones click to one side. Whole ones flow like tiny bones of a fish that learned to be currency. He does not hurry. He has learned this. People trust hands that do not rush. He checks the gourd weight against the beam. The bar creaks once, and then decides to be even. He lifts the weight, feels its familiar heft, and sets it down again. The cut sticks line up near his knee. Each one will be a notch when counting must be remembered with wood as well as mind. The reed pen rests in the dish. The dish is empty for now. Words can come later. The first trader arrives with a basket tied with a palm strip. She lays down the burden gently, the way you place bread. The basket holds bracelets thin as river reeds and bright as a new coin. They talk softly, as people do when the day is long enough for patience. She names a number. He nods. He tips cowries into the scales pan with the calabash, then adds a few more until the bean hesitates, then settles level. He shifts one shell back. Now the bean says yes. He does not pour the shells straight into her hand. He makes small piles on the mat, trained to 10s and 20s by habit. For small piles make a neat square. 2 squares make a tidy field. He strings one field on a raffia cord. Shell mouths all facing one way because facing matters later when a busy hour arrives. He ties the cord with a flat knot that will not cut into a bundle. The trader smiles. She pays a few shells back as a fee. He slides those to a corner of the mat and covers them with the calabash so the wind cannot find them. A goat coughs in the lane. Smoke from roasted yens strolls past and keeps moving. Children pass in a cluster, each with a task: fetch water, carry messages, learn the names of things. A drummer far off tries 3 slow beats and then rests. The weigher listens without looking up. Sounds are a ledger too. More shells pour into the pan. More piles appear. The bean persuades and is persuaded in turn. He tips a shell from one side to the other to match a price. Fingers learn to feel 10s without counting them out loud. When he speaks, he lets words stand like shade. Here is this many. Here is the fee. Your bundle sits straight. No one needs more than that. He keeps a little jar at his right elbow. It holds tiny stones and to dry seeds. Sticking to shells happens on dusty mornings. He drops one seed into the pan if grit makes the bean stubborn, then lifts it out when the surface is calm again. Small tricks are a kind of kindness. He learned them from a man who weighed before him. That man learned from another. The scale itself remembers. The second trader brings cloth. Patterns rise and fall like quiet waves. She sets down a length of indigo and waits with her hands folded. He knows her measure. They have worked many mornings together. They talk of nothing important while the bean decides. A light rain last night, a hen that learned to escape and was allowed to keep her pride, a child's new tooth. The cloth becomes shells, and the shells become a string, and the string becomes a bundle that will travel to another stall and then to another hand. Trade is a path you can walk with your eyes closed. A man with a ledger board stops by. He is careful the way beans are careful in a cooking pot, quiet, but all paying attention. His board carries shallow cuts for each house he serves. Notches in one column mean shells received. Notches in another mean shells owed. The weigher shows him the feed bundle under the calabash. He tips a short string into the man's bag for the market keeper. The man scratches a mark with a knife point, nods once, and goes away with his light step. Now a girl comes with a pouch sewn from an old cloth edge. Inside is a morning's savings, shells smoothed by many hands. She wants a small bracelet from the stall that sits in shade like a half-closed eye. The weigher counts softly so she can count with him. He makes a neat pile of 20, then slides to a second pile, then holds one shell between finger and thumb, turns it, and gives it back to her to keep for luck. He likes work that lets a day feel a little kinder. He keeps his own record with the cut sticks. One notch for one bundle prepared. A long notch at the 5th. A pause after the 10th to sip water from a gourd wrapped in a damp cloth. He refreshes the cloth from a bowl that lives in the shade. The bowl's clay wears the cool like a thin cloak. Water tastes of river and pot. He drinks without hurry and sets the gourd back into its nest. The sun climbs. The air grows round and warm. He shifts his mat a finger width so his knees stay in shade. He rubs the bean's pivot with a dot of oil pressed from a kernel, then wipes the extra with a rag that used to be a sleeve. The creak fades to a murmur. The scale is easier now. It floats and rests. Between customers he tends the shells. He tips handfuls onto the mat and shakes them with the calabash until dust leaves. He flicks away brittle chips. He pulls a few bright ones to a small dish for when a transaction wants elegance. Bright shells make agreement arrive a breath sooner. A woman with a head wrapped the color of fresh leaf arrives with a basket that smells faintly of roasted peppers. She trades in small, careful steps. A string for thread, another string for a measure of salt, a few shells returned for the weight of a gourd. Each exchange is a sound. Shells on wood. Wood on cut stick. Pen and dish. The reed pen finally earns its work. He breathes on the ink and writes a short line, house name, count, fee paid. The characters are simple. The page is plain. He blows on the line and sets the slip to dry beneath a shell. More hands. More shells. The bean continues its slow nods. When a gust wrinkles the palm fronds, he covers the main pile with the calabash and holds a hand flat above the bean for a moment. The wind listens and then wanders away to bother a stall of woven fans that do not mind. By the time the sun sits level with the market roof, a quiet order has emerged. Strings of shells coil in a shallow basket. A second basket holds fee strings that will travel to the keeper. A small dish of broken shells grows slowly. Later, a potter will ask for them to temper clay. Nothing is wasted that can become useful again. He checks the markers in his mind. One more string, then a pause. One more customer, then a taste of yen. He speaks a short blessing under his breath that his father used to say not to change anything, only to agree with it. The market breathes with him. A last transaction before rest. a trader of copper bracelets, careful and proud. The beam thinks, then balances. Shells fall into their piles like quiet rain. A string tightens. The knot sits flat. Few shells slide under the calabash. The ledger notch deepens with a small, sure bite of the knife. Midday waits just beyond the roof edge. The weigher turns his face to the shade and lets his shoulders loosen. Midday folds itself under the palm roof. The light outside grows white, but beneath the awning it turns the color of warm flour. Air thickens and slows. Work chooses smaller motions. He uncovers his midday food with the same care he uses for the scale. A leaf-wrapped parcel holds roasted yam and a small gourd of palm oil glowing like late sun. He opens the oil and floats a pinch of salt on its surface. The yam breaks under his fingers into clean pieces. He dips one and waits for the oil to find its way into the soft. Food asks for stillness. He gives it. A boy from the water seller's family brings a calabash with cool beads on its skin. For later, the boy says, already turning to run an errand. The weigher thanks him and slides the drink into the shadow at his back, where clay keeps a quiet chill. He shares a slice of yam in payment. The boy smiles with half his mouth and goes. The market does not sleep. It hushes. Voices become lower. Cloth stalls lift their edges to invite breeze. A pepper seller fans her brazier with a woven palm, not to intensify flame, only to move smoke away. The drummer rests, his sticks on his knee. The goats decide the far corner is theirs and gently insist. He is a visitor everyone knows how to host. The weigher strings shells. It is good work for this hour. He tips a measured heap onto the mat and counts by touch, 1, 2, then by tens, then by 20s. Each 20th shell turns the cord toward him. The next 20th turns it away. The pattern tells his fingers where a bundle sits without needing eyes. Raffia runs rough over the groove at the base of each shell. He pulls the cord snug, ties a flat knot, presses it flat with his thumb, and lifts the string briefly to feel its weight. It lands back on the mat with a small, dry sound. A woman arrives with a question folded into her hands. 2 short strings lie across her palm. The knots are cousins, not twins. The cloth seller says this string is short, she says, placing one string on the pan. I counted. He counted. Our numbers disagree. The weigher nods, invites her to sit, and gives the disagreement a place to rest. He places her string on the left pan and a standard string his own, tied earlier on the right. He knows his string. It carries the right weight when joined with the gourd. The beam floats, then leans toward the right by a shell's worth, maybe 2. He removes a shell from his string. The beam now leans toward hers. He adds 1 to his own. He sees the measure is off by a single shell. He does not say who is wrong. He says, this one is missing one. He picks up a bright shell from the small dish and sets it on her string. Then he ties the knot again so it lies true. Now it is right. The woman exhales a little of the day and smiles. She will return to the cellar with something that weighs like agreement. A man waits in shade with a basket of dried fish that smell of lake and sun. He wants the price a bundle higher than yesterday. He gestures to the sky and to the heat, and to the distance the fish traveled. The weigher listens, and does not interrupt the air. He lifts one fish, checks its firmness, and nods slowly. He adds a small string to the pan and lets the beam decide. When it settles, he looks at the man, not at the scale, and says, "The road is long today." They agree with their shoulders. Shells move as if they always meant to end up in that basket. The ledger board man returns, not hurried, never hurried. He carries his weight the way a well-made bull carries water, steady, not proud. He sits for a short time and counts the fee strings under the calabash. He moves 3 to his bag and leaves one behind to pay for sweeping at dusk. He makes a notch on his board for the market keeper and another notch for the floor cleaner. The notches look alike but live in different columns. He mutters a house name and the number that follows it. His knife bites wood with a sound like a small insect. He moves on, board under his arm, hat shading his intentions. A breeze tries the roof. The palm ribs answer with a dry whisper. The weigher rubs a dot of oil on the beam's pivot again. He had planned to do it later, but wind makes a pivot remember friction. He lifts the beam free for a breath, cleans the pin with the corner of his cloth, touches the oil, and sets it home. The beam thanks him by forgetting to complain. A cluster of young apprentices arrives in a wave of low laughter. They carry the day the way teenagers do, with knees and elbows and the promise of stories. One needs change for a small coin that will travel to a broom cellar. The weigher counts shells into the boy's hand and keeps the coin under a small stone near the ledger slips. He will trade it later for shells when the keeper passes. Money is fluent here. It speaks more than one language. When disputes come, they come small. A trader of beads counts fast and reaches for the string before the beam is quiet. The weigher closes his hand over the string and waits with his eyes on the beam, not on the trader. The beam decides. He opens his hand. The trader breathes out, and the next time counts slower, the way he already knew to do. Another woman brings a string that tangles. He does not pull it free like a knot in hair. He loosens it from the middle, watching how the raffia wants to lie, and it remembers its straightness. He runs the string across the lip of the calabash to take up twist. It lands smooth. She nods her thanks with her chin. He refreshes his pen. Soot blows from a tiny covered bowl into the dish with a breath. Water follows from a gourded leaf edge, just enough to make a firm gray. He tests the mix on the underside of the mat, a dot that no one will see. He writes 3 lines on a slip, a name, account, a small tally mark for fee peg. He dries the slip under flat shell. Paper takes ink and then becomes quiet. Shade lengthens. Heat slackens a little. Sellers lift their chins and speak again at their usual size. The drummer tries a pattern, modest and agreeable. A child drops a fan. Another picks it up without being asked. The goat in the far corner convinces itself that a shadow is grass and accepts the discovery without correction. The weigher takes his drink at last. The calabash is still cool. Water carries clay and a sweetness that is not sugar, only clean. He pours a little into his mouth and holds it there for a beat before swallowing. He thanks the water with a sound so small that only the mat hears. He uses his stick to mark the mat at the edge of his work to short scratches. These are not for anyone else. They tell him when the day began to turn toward later, and how many strings lived in that hour. When the mat is rolled tonight, the marks will go with it. Tomorrow's mat will learn new ones. A trader from the salt pans arrives, ankles dusted white, eyes careful from the reflecting sun. He wants to trade in bundles, not handfuls, and he wants his bundles checked because brightness in salt can fool hands about weight. The wearer agrees. He breaks one bundle, counts by tens, checks the beam, and ties it again. He returns it with the knot flattened and the tails tucked right. He tips a bright shell into the man's palm for luck on the last stretch home. The man laughs once and tucks the shell into his belt, the way people do with small talismans they pretend are only shells. When someone counts wrong and knows it, they look at the ground. When someone counts wrong and does not know it, they look at the beam as if it were a door that will not open. The wearer treats both faces the same. He gives time. He gives a path. He moves a shell from one side to the other with a slow finger and shows how the beam chooses. He does not say see, he lets them see. A breeze brings the smell of rain from far away, the kind that thinks about visiting and changes its mind. He lifts his head, listens, and then returns to his hands. He ties, counts, notes, sips, checks, and waits small acts that repeat without becoming noise. Afternoon will come. For now the market rests in the middle, held together by mats and shade, by strings that tell the truth, by a beam that remembers where even is. Afternoon arrives as a longer blink between breaths. The light outside the palm roof brightens and then softens, like cloth dipped once and lifted. The market widens its voice again. A cart's wheel finds its track. A seller of calabashes taps two bowls together and approves the note they make. Travelers step out of the dust like thoughts that have walked a long way. Their clothes tell a story without asking to be heard, leather darkened with oil, cloth the color of roofs after rain, small silver charms that like the sun. One man carries a narrow bundle of blue cloth wrapped around itself. Another balances a skin bag of something weighty on his shoulder, the strap lying quiet a crossbone. They greet the wearer, palms open, not because they must, but because this stall keeps measure for more than one kind of trade. He bows with a nod made of ease rather than ceremony. They settle near the mat's edge. They do not sit like people who intend to stay, but they allow their knees to rest. The first traveler unwinds his bundle. Indigo shows deep as late water. It smells of leaf and slow time. He names a price by laying a string of shells on the mat as if laying out a line of road. The wearer does not answer with words yet. He sets the string on the left pan and the gourd weight on the right. The beam hovers, then leans toward the weight. He adds bright shells from his small dish, one, then one, then one, until the beam's language is level. He slides the balanced string gently back to the mat and nudges a few shells aside, the fee for the stall, small and known. The traveler counts with his eyes and his breath. He ties the shells with a knot that promises not to slip in a hurry. The second traveler lowers the skin bag to the ground with a careful exhale. Cowries pay for much, but sometimes shells need to listen to iron. He opens the throat of the bag and rolls out two small bars of metal. They are quiet, dense, and honest. The beam likes to speak to weight. The weigher places a bar on one pan, shells on the other, then removes shells until the beam steadies, a boat that has found the right place on water. He notes the count with his reed pen iron to bars shells, this many feed this, the slip dries under a shell. The bars go to a trader to stalls away, who has already been watching with interest and a polite distance. The shells return to the skin bag and will walk a different road this evening. Between exchanges, the weigher listens to the rope that holds his beam. Market dust has found it, time has too. The twist at the pivot shows a small tired place where fibers think about becoming separate. He thanks it under his breath and prepares a repair. He removes the beam from its cradle, cradles it with both hands, and sets it on the mat as if sharing a secret. He draws a fresh cord from his basket, palm fiber spun tight in the evening 3 days ago. He rubs the new cord with a hint of oil so its first work will not burn. He unties the old knot slowly so the rope can tell him how it has been carrying. Then he threads the new cord through the hole at the beam center, makes a loop that knows how to sit flat, and finishes with a hitch that will not think of slipping. He tests the hang with 2 fingers. The beam rests in the air like a line drawn by a steady hand. He ties the ends off under the crossbar where eyes do not always go. The old cord coils into a circle and waits. Tomorrow it will become small ties for counting strings, a second life given without fuss. A small boy watches with his mouth a little open. He is the water seller's cousin, not quite tall enough to see the bean's nose without stretching. The weigher taps the mat beside him. "Sit," he says, "and sing with your fingers." The boy smiles because this is work disguised as play. The weigher lays out shells in a long line, then groups them by 2s, then by 10s. He sings a counting song that has walked this market longer than memory. 1 hand, 2 hands, a bundle, another bundle. The market rests, the market wakes. On the 20th shell, he shifts the line into a small pile and taps the boy's knuckles softly. "Here," he says, "the hand remembers for the muff." They go again, 20 and a tap, 20 and a tap, until 5 small piles sit like small hills. The boy repeats the song under his breath, a little shy, a little proud. The weigher nods and ties one of the piles onto a cord. He places the string in the boy's palm. "Carry this to your aunt," he says, "and tell her the rope's twist is right." The boy leaves with careful feet, knowing that drops count even when they are shells. The caravan men rise, but trade is a thing with more than one shadow. A third traveler lingers with a pouch that chimes softly when he sets it down. Cowries clack, but these do not. He opens the mouth and reveals small beads, glass green and river blue, some with a white eye in the middle. Weight is not the only truth, number speaks here. He pours a finger's width onto the mat. The weigher places a bright shell beside them only to frame the color. He does not weigh the beads. He measures them by space and by agreement. He lines them into groups of 5, then folds the 5 into 10s by placing a cowrie above each pair like a roof. This makes a little city of counting. The traveler counts 2, touching each group with a nail. They arrive at the same sum. Shells move back into the pouch not as payment but as counters returned. The weigher ties a bundle of cowries to match, then adds 2 bright ones not as a gift, as accuracy taught by light. A woman from a nearby stall brings a small trouble that isn't one. The beam drifts for her, even after balance. The weigher smiles and places his palm over the pivot. "Wind," he says, and waits. The air pauses. He releases the beam. It rests. She nods. They finish the price. They end with a small laugh that leaves room for air to come back if it likes. A child returns with a question from an aunt: how to make a string lie flat when raffia has decided to be a spring. He takes a piece of cord and shows the child the path across the calabash's lip. Here, he says, drawing the cord under steady pressure. The lip teaches the cord to remember straight. He hands the cord back. The child tries and smiles at the way it changes shape without argument. The lesson costs no shells and travels quicker than a cart. A leather worker arrives from the shade, his hands smelling of smoke and fat. He needs a price on a belt thick and well sewn, the holes neat like little moons. He does not ask for more because of the stitch count. He asks for enough to keep hides willing to become belts. The wearer lifts the belt, listens to its softness, and lays shells on the pan until the beam rests. He ties the strings together end to end. He points to the knot. Strong, he says. The leather worker grins, touches the knot with a thumb, and plants the belt's buckle inside his basket like a bird sleeping with its head under its wing. Small repairs visit again, made of wood this time. A pan's rim rubs rough against the beam's hook where dust has made a thin pane. The wearer wraps a strip of cloth around the hook, thin as a breath, then turns the pan's wire through the cloth so metal speaks to cloth before it speaks to wood. Friction becomes manners. The pan swings and rests without whispering complaint. A long-distance trader pauses only to take water from the boy and to leave a story about a road farther north where the wind forgot directions for a week. The wearer listens with the same attention. He gives a shell's edge. Stories are another scale. When the trader leaves, he looks back once at the stall as if checking a compass. The wearer lifts his chin in return. People are weights and measures. As well, they balance a day. The counting song returns quietly when there is a lull. The boy who learned it tries it again, tapping 20s with a reed on the mat's border. Another child joins and adds a soft clack on every 40th shell. They are building a rhythm that the market already knows. The wearer lets it live. Songs keep the hands even when the mind looks at the sky. A faint shadow crosses the roof that is not cloud, only the afternoon ray teaching shade where to stand. He wipes his hands on his cloth. He checks the fee strings under the calabash and ties them into a single loop for the keeper's man. He counts them once with eyes, once with finger, once with arm weight. The loop feels right. The beam lifts, lowers, rests. Shells travel. Pouches fill. Baskets lighten. The day's middle becomes the day's later without choosing a moment. Trade stands up again after its noon bowl and continues with the same slow respect. Late afternoon gathers itself at the market's edges. Light leans warmer, shadows learn longer shapes. The air loosens the knot it had tied around noon. People stand a little straighter. Work begins to think about ending, not from weariness, but because days have a shape, and this is the time when it rounds off. The caravan men return in small 2s and 3s. They carry their decisions with the ease of people who have counted 3 times. One shoulders a bundle of cloth now smaller than in the morning. Another ties the throat of a skin bag that sounds like shells talking to each other in a dream. They come to the wearer for the last adjustments that make a trail comfortable. Small change of string tightened, a fee remembered so no one will have to remember it on the road. The wearer sets his mat flatter with a palm, not because it needs it, but to greet this part of the day. He turns the beam with 2 fingers and listens. The new cord made earlier hums along its twist. He covers the bright shell dish with his calabash lid. Evening prices prefer steadiness more than shine. A traveler asks to change two long strings into many small ones. The wearer nods, unties each cord with a patient thumb, lays out heaps in forts of 20, then restrings them into neat short lengths tied with low knots that will not press into a palm underweight. The man tests one by swinging it once, then coils it into a pouch. He touches his forehead with two fingers, thanks without sentence, and steps away lighter. Another brings back a question about a fee forgotten when the sun was tallest. The wearer finds the slip, house mark, count, notch for fee. The slip wears a shell's round shadow where it dried. He lifts the shell to show what was written underneath. The man smiles and puts down the small payment into the corner under the calabash. Paper and shell now agree the road will be quiet. The ledger board man returns in the light that makes dust look golden. He sets his board on his knees and draws breath like someone about to tell a simple story. He lifts the calabash and counts the loop fee strings the wearer tied earlier. His knife walks the wooden tidy steps, making marks that feel like footsteps leading home. For the market keeper, a notch. For the sweepers, a notch. For the guard who sits nights near the gate, a notch. He repeats each house name softly, as if rolling a bead across his tongue to find its hole. When he has finished, he tips a few shells from his own small pouch onto the mat to balance a difference he carries from a stall where someone paid a breath extra. He prefers that everything end even. The wearer nods once and moves the shells to the keeper's loop so the day will not lean. Dust collects around cowries the way stories gather around people who sit still. The wearer takes a palm broom, small as a hand, and brushes the mat with strokes that begin in the center and move outward like water. He sweeps broken chips into a little dish. A potter's boy has already drifted closer, eyes trained on scraps that will give clay a better temper. The wearer pours the pieces into the boy's waiting calabash. The boy grins and says he will carry the dish as if it were a drum, but he walks away with both hands careful. Travelers tie their packs. Leather squeaks. Rope learns a new memory. Someone drinks from the water seller's gourd and nods at the taste. A woman checks the knot on her head wrap. A man lifts a basket and lowers it again to feel how it will ride on the road. The wearer's hands make last bundles, the knots flat and sure. A breeze from the west drops one leaf and then loses interest. A laugh falls from a stall and lands softly like cloth. Small blessings travel better than heavy words. The wearer offers them the way he offers shells, exact enough, not more. May the road find your feet. May the shade be where you need it. May your rope remember to be kind. The caravan men answer with their own short wishes. May your beam rest level. May your shells stay talkative. May your gourd never go dry. Blessings are a kind of counting that does not need a beam. A woman with peppers bright as coal stops to weigh a measure for tomorrow's sauce. She pays with a short string and a handful of thanks. She leaves half a roasted pepper on a leaf for the wearer to taste later when the market is almost a memory. He tucks the gift under the edge of his basket, away from the shells where warm things wait. Children return from errands, trailing a dust ribbon. The boy who learned 20s earlier comes back with a straightened cord and a proud mouth. He sings the counting song very quietly through his teeth. The weigher gives him a new lesson: how to feel 10 with a pinch and 20 with a fold. He pours shells into the child's palm and closes the boy's fingers around them. "Listen to the weight," he says. The boy nods with great seriousness, as if someone has told him a Rhodes secret. He opens his hand again, counts out 10 by feel, and smiles when his eyes agree. The bean answers fewer questions now. Carts creak toward lanes. Stalls begin to look like they're morning shapes in reverse. Traders check corners, lift baskets, tie knots. A catskin drum at the far edge tries 3 low beats. They travel under the roof like a soft animal. A hawker of small cakes passes and leaves 2 on the weigher's mat for reckoning tomorrow. Debt between friends is a thread, not a chain. The weigher begins his end-of-day tallies. He lays the ledger slips in a line and counts the day by touch as much as by. He stacks them by houses. He sets fee loops in a bowl for the keeper's man. He writes a short line with the reed pen for himself only. Cord changed, beam happy. He writes another for the sweepers. Chips gathered to potter. He ties the slips with a thin cord and tucks the bundle under the basket slip where desk will not read it. He lifts the main sack of shells. It has thinned, but holds itself well. He kneads the mouth to soften the cord, then ties it in a knot. His father taught him a knot that releases without argument in the morning and does not fail at night. He tips a small measure into a second bag that will travel home in his hand. It is easier to carry 2 that are light than 1 that looks brave and bites the wrist. Evening steps into the room without asking for light. The paper screens turn the sky into a mild gray blue. The garden gives back only its nearest stones. Everything becomes rounder and quieter, like speech wrapped in cloth. The host begins to close the day. He reaches for the cedar chest where finished packets and notes have gathered. The lid lifts with a soft hush. Inside, small bundles lie in neat rows. He sorts them by blend and use, sachets for sleeves to one side, tablets for paper drawers to another, pearls still ripening in their mulberry wraps to the back where shade sits longest. He nests thin cedar slips between layers so Eric can walk slowly. The lid returns to place, meeting the box with a touch that sounds like agreement. A narrow tray for gifts is brought out. It is black lacquer with a red edge that looks like a smile. He lines the tray with plain paper, places 2 sachets marked for the elder visitor, and sets a single cord sachet with the thread tail coiled for the younger. Each parcel receives a small paper tag, no bigger than a thumb joint, with the blend's name and a date. He ties the tags with silk that matches nothing in particular. Matching would call attention. He prefers that gifts feel as if they always belong to the hands that will take them. He opens the letter chest one last time. The tray of wrappers warm from earlier sits calm. He slips 2 sheets into a shallow sleeve box and lays a sachet under its floor. He writes a small note for autumn letters and slides it beneath the top layer. The chest's lid comes down with its small wooden catch. He touches the lid once, not to push it firmer, only to tell it the day's over. Next, he tends the censer for sleep. He removes the lid and looks at the ash. The field shows the morning's ripples softened by time. He lifts the rake and levels the surface to a gentle plain. No hill, no path, just rest. With the feather whisk he smooths the top until the ash looks like a brushed page. He pinches out any lingering red under the surface and adds a breath more ash to cool the bed. The mica plate, clean and dry, returns to its sleeve. The censer's lid tilts a fraction so any whisper of warmth can stray without asking permission. Coal and charcoal have their own end of day work. He opens a jar where spent pieces sleep. He lays today's cool bits among them. A few sound like tiny shells as they meet. The jar's lid closes. The sound is small and right. A second jar holds tomorrow's charcoal, cut earlier, dried for weeks. He checks a piece with his fingers. It is light and tight. He sets the jar where the air is dry and steady. The mortar receives a final wipe. He folds a cloth into a soft square and cradles the bowl as he cleans. He paints the rim with a touch of sesame oil on his fingertip. The wood pestle gets a whisper of oil as well. Tools like to be remembered this way. They answer with long lives and better tempers. The brass spoon rests on its tray corner, bright enough to acknowledge light but not ask for it. He attends to the ledger. The brush bristles are awake again, shaped to a fine point. He writes a last line for the day. Package sachets, 8. Placed, robe chest, letter chest, brush rack. Gifts prepared. Free. He adds the smallest note about the ash. Field leveled, mica cooled. Then a weather line. Air still, evening mild. He sets the brush down, bristles up. He weaves the page with 2 smooth stones, their weight learned by long use. When the ink loses its shine, he threads the silk cord through the ledger's corner and ties a loose knot. Not closing, only keeping. The room now asked for soft air. He opens the screen a hand's width. Garden cool comes in carrying the smell of moss and water. Somewhere, a bamboo drip ticks into a stone basin. Night insects begin a steady song that does not insist. The paper of the screens moves a little and then decides to be still. He checks the robe for evening. It hangs on a low rail by the screen, sleeves laid neatly. He tucks a light sachet into the inner fold near the collar, where warmth from skin will wake it gently. He smooths the cloth once with a flat palm. The robe answers by falling into its own lines. A belt rests coiled on a tray, soft with long use. He lifts it, checks the stitch on its edge, and lays it down again so the twist will not remember itself wrong. At the sleeping platform, bedding waits. A cotton layer lies flat. A thin cover has been folded to the side. He takes 1 tablet of the lighter blend and places it in a small open dish near the pillow, not under, not hidden. He does not want a face to find a scent too close. He wants it to be the air itself, only a little kinder. He sets the dish on a wooden stand and turns it so the shallow cloud shape looks toward the room. The tablet will make no mark. It will suggest a place. A writing box sits near the bed. He opens it and breathes the faint odor of ink paper and cedar. He slides 1 scented wrapper into the bottom, under the paper sheets. He rests the brush on its support and turns the inkstone so its darker corner faces the back. He closes the lid. The latch falls with a quiet, satisfied clink. The house learns night. In the corridor, a lamp is turned low. Its paper shade gives off a pale, steady glow. The lamp's oil is checked. The wick is trimmed to a thin smile. A screen door a few rooms away finds its peg and stops moving. Voices in the distance settle into almost silence. The kitchen's last bowl is turned upside down. The garden stops showing colors and shows only shapes. He returns to the workroom once more to look at what it is now that nothing asks to be done. The low table stands cleared except for the ledger, the tray of tools, and the small stone that holds the brush stands steady. The censer rests with its lid in place, its shape like a calm full moon. The cedar chest is closed. The letter chest is closed. The baskets are empty or covered. The air is balanced with the low paper round a held memory of a loose wood, a faint sweetness at the edge where the winter blend had spoken. If you stood here with eyes closed, you could tell the time without seeing the sky. He bows to the room. It is not a ceremony. It is a habit of gratitude. He lowers his head, exhales, and raises his eyes. He slides the screen to nearly closed, leaving a small opening so the room can trade breath with the night. The last thing his hand does is adjust the tray by a finger's width so it sits square to the mat edge. Order is a pillow for the mind. He steps into the corridor. The tatami take his footfalls, as if they were part of the floor's own thought. He carries the tray of gifts under one arm. A servant will deliver them in the morning, when roads are polite and shops lift their shutters. He leaves the workroom door as it is. A faint ribbon of scent goes with him, not enough to claim space, only enough to teach the corridor that a day has been finished. The night becomes itself. A far bell makes a line across the city and then leaves. The basin ticks. A moth touches the screen once like a single note, then forgets to come again. The house is not full, it is complete. In the workroom, the small tablet at the bedside begins its mild work, and the robe near the screen learns the cooler air. The ledger dries its final characters. The cedar shelves hold their patience. The scent in the room will not travel far. It will sit and accompany sleep like a quiet friend. From a distant market, a wind carries something different, a dust-dry hint of shells and rope, of palm mat and roasted yen. Far to the west, under a woven awning, hands count by tens and twenties while a wooden scale listens. And as the last breath of wood settles back into ash, we step into shade and warm air, to a stall in ore where cowries turn into numbers, and a day's work is measured by the gentle weight of shells. The waiting room has gone to sleep. Benches remember the day's coats and boots, but they hold only air now. Beyond a half door, the office keeps a small island of light where a kerosene lamp turns brass warm, and the telegraph sounder practices its gentle syllables. Frost climbs the bottom panes of the window in soft ferns. The stove ticks as it settles into a steady, banked heat. Paper ink canvas and coal smoke mix into a drowsy scent that belongs to late hours and careful work. This is the hour the night operator knows best. Whenever you're ready to drift off, you can sit beside the desk in your mind and watch simple tools do their jobs. A key worn smooth where a thumb rests, waits on its little spring. A logbook lies open, columns ruled by hand. A date stamp sleeps with its ribbon. In a dented mug, weak tea gives its last small warmth. Outside, the rails keep their line under thin moonlight, and the platform boards hold the cold like a quiet thought. He begins by waking each piece of the room, not with noise but with touch. The lamp's glass chimney lifts. A trimmed wick shows an even, honest edge. He pinches it between a folded scrap so soot stays on paper, not fingers, then lowers the chimney and rolls the wheel until the flame sits low and steady. Kerosene gives a friendly, low hum when it is pleased. The polished reflector behind the chimney throws a soft oval onto the timetable tacked to the wall, enough to read but never to glare. At the desk's back corner, 4 glass battery jars stand like clear, patient workers. Inside them, zinc and copper plates hang from wooden bars above dilute acid. He checks the wire clips with thumb and finger tight, not pinching, and touches a cloth to any bead of corrosion that thinks about forming. This may seem unusual today, but in the 19th century many small stations kept their own wet cells alive through the seasons, adding water when the air was dry and replacing plates when they grew thin. He settles on the high stool, rolls one shoulder, then the other, and rests the heel of his hand on the desk edge. The wire is quiet but alive. He turns the little tension screw on the sounder breath, easing the armature closer so the clicks are small, well-spaced, and polite. A test call goes out. Station letters tap steady, not loud, the way a neighbor knocks on a familiar door. The return click comes a second later, a distant room in another county saying, "I'm here." He notes the moment in the log with a simple mark and a time. Lines sound clear. Message blanks sit into stacks, one ruled for telegrams from the public, the other for company business train orders, equipment notes, small exchanges that teach rails to share. He squares the corners with his palm so the papers breathe together. A rubber eraser, worn to a friendly shape, waits on a saucer. Pencil stubs too long enough to sharpen once more. One already blunt but brave rests beside the inkwell. The inkwell's cork is tied to its neck with a loop of string, a kindness against loss. He listens to the room. Soft things tell him what needs doing. The clock on the shelf has taken on a slightly faster voice. He lifts it down, opens the back, and advances the pendulum's tiny regulator a hair toward us. He wins the key until resistance says stop, and sets the clock back on the shelf, steadying its feet with a gentle twist so it sits square. The pocket watch on the desk gets a look too. Its chain makes a small half circle on the wood. Watch and shelf clock agree. The station will keep their time, and the trains will keep theirs. The stove gets a last attention. He draws the iron lifter across the little door and nudges one coal that has rolled forward. A fresh shovel of nut coal goes in sighs. The damper slides to the night position, not tight, not eager. He sets the kettle on top, not to boil, only to warm. An enamel cup with a chip on its rim will take water later for tea. On very cold nights he lays a slate over the stove for drying gloves, but not tonight. The room's dryness is already enough for paper. The sounder stirs a brief call to characters that belong to the dispatcher to the west. He moves the logbook closer, steadies the pencil, and answers with the station letters, even pace, no flourish. The message is simple, a status line, a friendly check, no orders yet. He writes without hurry, 112 DSPW. Line good. No holds. He underlines neatly and leaves a small space before the next entry. Between traffic, he keeps the desk surface ordered to the eye. Sleep likes straight lines and known places. He takes up the date stamp and thumbs the wheel until the right day shows in the little window. The ribbon takes ink with a soft exhale when he presses it into the pad. He tests it on a scrap and sees the circle of letters come up clear, then returns it to its place beside the scale. The small brass scale measures coins and parcels, not because the office is a shop, but because a night train can bring a last-minute packet from the store 2 towns over, and the line prefers exactness even in small weights. Shelves above the desk hold thin code books and a dog-eared company rule book. He opens the rule book to a page that lives close to his hands. Send clearly, receive kindly, record neatly. The phrasing is older than his job and will be here when he retires. He closes the book again and sets it square to the shelf edge. He does not need to read to remember. Sometimes looking is only a way to nod. Across the room, canvas mail pouches hang from iron arms like sleeping coats. He checks the facing slips pinned to each 1 town names written with a small, upright hand. He smooths one that has curled from stove heat and tucks it under the twine tie so it will lie flat. The catcher arm that takes a mail sack at speed is bolted up for the night. He runs a cloth over its iron face, more out of habit than need, and then leaves it folded like a bird wing. He tears a telegram blank from the stack and writes the heading lines in a tidy script, received at from time. He does this now so the night will feel prepared. He writes another and leaves it ready. Stacks of readiness calm the room. A small draught tickles the lamp's flame when the door to the platform opens to admit a bit of night. He sets a wedge against the jamb to keep it from moving, then puts his ear to the crack. Somewhere far down the line, a wheel rumbles over a trestle and makes a sound like a barrel rolling. It is not his train. He closes the door gently and lets the latch correct itself. He pours what remains of the lukewarm tea into the enamel cup and adds a spoon of hot water from the kettle. The mixture is thin and kind. He dips a biscuit from the tin, the paper wrap making a soft crinkle. The biscuit yields with a grit that reminds him of flour and afternoons. He takes one small bite and returns the rest to the paper. Food at night must be folded back to sleep. The wire wakes again faster now, but still not in a hurry. He leans forward, elbow planted, pen lifted, and receives a note about a consist change to divisions away. He copies it exactly, pauses on a figure, and taps once to confirm. The reply returns right. He underlines the number once, not twice. He blots the line with a rectangle of scrap cut from an old envelope. The blotter paper has a faint blue grid from a former life. It wears its past lazily. Outside, frost thickens into little stars on the glass. He makes a note in the margin, temp falling, wind light. Weather is not his official work, but the section crew likes a line in the morning. The station cats, who spend their days supervising sacks, have already found their nests under the bench in the waiting room. One gives a single questioning sound and then returns to the business of being warm. He draws a slow breath and lets it go. The room returns it as a faint fog against the window before it disappears. The desk, the key, the clock, the stove, the line, they all agree to keep each other company. He rests his wrist on the blotter and listens for the next soft sentence the wire will send. The wire begins to speak in sentences that know where they are going. Not hurried, only steady. He slides the log a little closer, turns the pencil to a fresh edge, and settles his wrist on the blotter the way a bird settles on a branch it has stood on before. A station east sends a weather courtesy first, snow by dawn, with a question mark tapped like a raised eyebrow. He answers, frost on panes, stars hold, and adds the time. These side notes may never be entered in a company ledger, but crews remember who told them to carry the wool scarf instead of the thin one. The next message arrives with a rhythm he recognizes as the postmaster to town's north. The man's hand is tidy even when translated into clicks, a short greeting, then a local notice: doctor required at Mile Farm in morning. Please advise incoming passenger if he rides. The operator copies the words on a public blank, prints the name of the doctor in a firmer hand, and tucks the sheet under a clip where passengers will see it first thing. He stamps the top right corner. The date circle appears crisp, a little crown of letters around the numbers. He sets the sheet aside to catch its breath. Between wires, the office acts like a small tide. He stands, lifts the nearest canvas pouch from its iron arm, and swings it to the sorting table. The facing slip says River City in pencil that has faded to a thawsoft gray. He tightens the knot on the slip so it will not loosen, and reads the tag beneath, Nike. He opens the tie with his twine knife, the blade short and patient, and loosens the mouth with both thumbs. Envelopes have settled in the bottom like shingles. He fans them out into his palm, reading the towns as if they were family names at gathering: Maple, River City, Jackson's Ford, Willow Spur. The scale of the line lives in these words. A handful belong farther west. He feeds them into the right pigeonholes, label side up, stamp corner to the right, so the morning man can double-check without bending the neck. A small parcel brown paper, string smartly crossed, announces itself with a little thump. The label says gloves size 7, and the return corner reads a seamstress's name he knows. He weighs it out of habit and writes the figure in the ledger margin. None of this is dramatic. It is the kind of quiet work that adds up to a town knowing what time feels like. The sounder clicks what might be a question, then becomes one. The dispatcher to the west wants to know if the siding switch lamp still burns. The operator takes the short lantern from its hook, trims its wick with a fold of paper, and steps out to the platform with a wool cap pulled low. Cold air folds around him neatly. The switch stand lies 20 paces down. Its little green eye looks back from the dark like a polite cat. He taps the metal target with 2 fingers, hears a dull, content ring, and returns to the office where the lamp's oval of warmth is waiting. Lamp good, he taps. Stand free, he writes the exchange in the log with a small underline, then rubs his thumb along the pencil's edge to smooth a rough place. He pours a mouth of hot water from the kettle into the enamel cup, and wakes what remains of the tea. The steam lifts with the light, earthy smell of leaves that have done this before. He drinks in slow sips that do not ask the body to remember day. A distant tremor begins to lean against the rails. He hears it first with the boards, then with the window glass, then with the little cowings of frost that quiver along the sill. He looks to the clock, notes the time, and stands. The midnight freight will cross the far trestle in 3, then past the section house. Then the north fence line where someone tied a length of blue cloth last summer that still flickers on good nights. He lifts the heavy leather-bound train register from the shelf and opens to tonight's page. A ruled line waits for the engine number, a column for direction, a space for notes that rarely ask for more than all well. He pulls the platform door until it just barely latches, and steps out again to the edge where the boards end and cinders begin. Your tastes like iron when you stand still in it long enough. The lamp he carries glows as if it approves of the train for making use of the track. The freight shews itself as a long thought. First the headlight, trimmed to a responsible cone, then the engine's face, black and honest, then the rhythm, wheels speaking to joints. A call and answer that has practiced so often it can sing itself while half asleep. The driver gives one soft acknowledgment with the whistle, not a shout, just a greeting that fits the hour. The operator lifts the lamp slightly and does not wave. He is not signaling, only acknowledging company. Cars pass like counted breaths. Boxcars with stenciled towns. A livestock car whose winter slats keep wind from being a bully. A flat car with a load tied down so thoroughly the ropes look calm. Coal, then empties that sound lighter and a little surprised. The caboose lamp winks a slow red when it goes by. After, the rails continue to hum for a few long seconds, a sound that stays even while the train has already become a set of smaller sounds somewhere farther away. He writes the time in the register and the notation, Freight West on time. Quiet, back at the desk, he stamps the register line with the date like a little seal and returns the book to its shelf. He jots a brief wire to the dispatcher, and the next station down engine passed, on time because small loops of courtesy hold the line as surely as bolts. He rehangs the pouch he emptied and reaches for another. This one fat with outgoing letters someone slid through the brass slot in the waiting room door before bed. He aunties each bundle with his twine knife's back edge so he will not nick the string, then readies with a square knot the morning man can unmake easily. He fixes a fresh facing slip to the mouth with a pin whose head has become oval from many nights' fingers. He leans the pouch on the lower rung so it knows where it is going next. The sounder brings in a slow domestic line from a tiny station on the branch, baby boy 2 a.m. mother resting, followed by the operator's initials, as if they were part of the body of the message. He smiles and writes a congratulations reply on company time because some rules are understood at the level of bones rather than pages. He does not stamp that note. It needs only the wire and the space it makes in a room. A local farmer's son rattles the outer door with a glove and slips in, hat rim frosted like a rim of glass. He keeps to the waiting room, respectful of the half door, and asks if there is any mail for the farm. The operator checks the pigeonhole marked with their road's name and finds a single envelope with a neat left-handed script. He passes it through the half door and nods at the boy's whispered thanks. The lad disappears in a small gust of cold. The bench shivers once and then sits again. He sharpens a pencil with the little penknife, as if teaching a stick how to work. The shavings curl into a tidy spiral that he drops into the stove's ash pail where paper ends also live. He rubs the point on the blotter's blank corner and writes a test word line, and then draws a tiny box around it, a private habit that pleases his eye. Clicks gather again, a transfer order for a car of flour at the junction. He receives, repeats, and confirms exact words, a figure and initial. He writes the order into the thin pad with the red rule at the top, then copies it clean onto a second sheet. He places both under a weight that once was a glass insulator, clear and heavy, smooth to the palm. Later, at dawn the day agent will sign, the section man will glance, and a car will roll down a track a few feet to the left to rest against a different purpose. He looks up. The cats under the bench resettle with a soft sigh that sounds like a page turning. The stove gives a single tick as a coal changes its mind. The lamp holds the same small, golden oval on the timetable, and the timetable returns the favor by being easy to read. He turns a page in the log. The lined paper makes a sound you can hear only if you are near it. He writes the R. Breaths lengthen. The wire dozes, then stirs, then dozes. He aligns the pencils on the desk and lets his hands rest, palms down, fingers slightly curled, ready but not waiting. Deep night settles like a wool blanket laid smoothly and tucked at the corners. The stove's tick grows slower. Frost ferns on the window stretch another inch along the pane, each leaf a calm arithmetic of branching lines. The cats under the bench change positions as if turning a page. The wire rests, then clears its throat. A long message begins measured, careful, to full for one breath. He leans forward, plants his elbow, and lets the pencil find its best angle. The clicks carry a merchant's winter order from the junction, items, quantities, notes about grades and barrel sizes, and the request to bill to the spring account. This kind of list has no drama and every need for precision. He writes in a square, tidy hand. For barrels, kerosene, water white. He underlines white once. 6 bolts calico, blue flour. He prints the color in capitals so later eyes will not wonder. 2 sacks seed oats, clean. He pauses on oats, repeats the word back over the wire for confirmation, receives a polite R, and moves on. Numbers writhe in little pairs. His pencil marks them as if laying fence posts, straight, evenly spaced, each with its small proof. This may seem fussy, but in these years a wrong figure could ripple through a county. He prefers to leave no ripples. He keeps the sheet square to the desk edge. He breathes through his nose slow and even, so breath will not disturb paper. When the list reaches a dozen lines, the sender rests. He taps back the total lines he has and the last word he copied. The far office answers with the next portion. 1 crate lamp chimneys, medium, 1 dozen wicks, 2 pounds stove black, 6 tins axle grease. He writes grease and then draws a small dot in the margin next to it, the private sign he uses to remind himself that tins like to be packed high in the pouch so nothing heavy crushes them. At the end, the merchant's operator sends the closing name, R, initials 3 little stitches that bind text to time. The nightman reads the whole message back at a calm pace, and the wire nods and clicks. He stamps the top corner, lets the ink breathe, and places the order sheet into the junction store pigeonhole with the top left showing like a tab. Tomorrow, the day agent will see that corner and understand the order's size without counting. He rubs the pencil point on the blotter to restore the line, then sets it down and notices a fray where the cloth-covered cord from the sounder bends around the desk's edge. The curd's cotton wrap has lifted, small as a hangnail. He pulls the tool drawer quietly and takes out a narrow strip of canvas tape, a corked vial of shellac, and a length of waxed linen thread. In these years, offices often repaired their own cords with whatever the station's boxes offered. A tidy mend now prevents an impatient mend later. He brushes dust from the fray with the corner of his sleeve and smooths the outer wrap with a fingernail. He winds the linen thread in even turns to press the cloth back to its manners, knotting flat so nothing will catch a sleeve. A whispering dab of shellac seals the knot. The smell is faintly sweet, like a workshop at noon. Over that, he winds 2 inches of canvas tape with overlapping edges, then warms it at the lamp side so the shellac thinks to set. His thumb tests the bend, flexes, holds, asks no questions. He puts away the thread in the drawer's front corner, where small, useful things remember to gather. The lamp itself speaks softly, a little note that means fuel will please me. He lifts the chimney by its cool wire handle and trims the wick with a crisp fold of paper into a slight arch. He sets the chimney aside, reaches under the desk for the square kerosene tin, and unscrews its cap with the rag-wrapped pliers that live on the stove rail. He places the lamp's narrow spout to the tin and pours like someone teaching a jar how to listen. Thin stream, steady hand, no splash. The wick drinks, the font fills, the scent of kerosene rises and settles. He wipes the lamp base with cloth so dust will not learn to stick, replaces the chimney, and coaxes the flame back to the same small height that does not scold eyes. The polished reflector returns its oval to the timetable in gratitude. The wire dozes. In the quiet, other small tasks return to him like coins forgotten in a pocket. He lifts the perforated tape used for the register stamp and advances it to hole so the date will not surprise him later by sitting crooked. He checks the blotter for wet corners and turns it end for end to spread the ink's patience evenly. He straightens the stack of blanks again and squares the mail tags so their holes line like buttons. A mild hiss brushes the roof. He looks up toward the rafters, though he can see nothing there. Wine has changed its mind by 2 points. The telegraph wires outside begin to sink thin, glassy, friendly as the breeze catches them just so. Poles at night become long instruments. He takes the station lantern from its nail, lifts its globe, and gives the wick the same good edge he granted the desk lamp. He sets the lantern's hood low so it will shield the flame from gusts, and opens the door. Cold air is a condition rather than a complaint now. It lays itself over his coat and hat, polite as a shawl. He steps onto the platform boards. They answer with familiar hollow notes, boards speaking to joists. He breathes through his mouth and tastes iron coal and the faint sweetness of far hay. Down the line, the order board's lamp shows steady through its green face. The little vane above the signal mast leans east, not far, not playfully either. He puts a palm against the siding's paint to learn the chill and smiles for no reason except that things are where they ought to be. He walks to the end of the platform and listens where rails meet night. The long taut wires between poles make a music you cannot keep but can remember. He checks the switch lamps again, green where green should be, no stray shadow, wicks at a height that will last. He cups a hand around one globe to see if the wind is daring. It is not. He turns back, careful of his steps, because the boards can collect a thin film when frost makes a quiet visit. Inside, the office world seems warmer for his absence. The stove offers a single contented tick. He hands the lantern back on its nail, not bumping the wall, then sets the lamp lifter in its knot so he will not have to look for it later. He notes the wind's turn in the margin of the log wind east light, wires singing, not for any rule, only for whoever reads and likes to picture a place. The sounder wakes with the distinct hand of the division dispatcher to the west. He sets his palm on the desk and answers. A slow, formal exchange follows, not hurried. A heads-up on a special car added at the junction. Instructions that will matter for morning switching, nothing for the night freight. He copies the wording onto the red rule pad used for such notes and reads it back in exactly the same cadence. The dispatcher's final clicks feel like a hat tip. He places the pad under the glass insulator weight again and draws a neat rectangle around the line number. He takes a moment to refill the inkwell with a tiny funnel, a tool too small to be strictly necessary, and exactly right for the hour. The ink smells of soot and gum. He touches the nib's tip to the lip of the well to shake off what wants to follow, wipes it on a cloth that remembers hundreds of such passes, and replaces the cork. He turns the nib across the blotter and watches a hairline mark dry to dull, satisfied. He checks the mail pouches once more, because pouches like to be checked in threes. The facing slips face, the ties tie, the mouths sit easy. He runs his hand along the catcher bag's reinforced neck where the iron hook will take it at speed tomorrow. The leather feels oiled and awake. He slides a thin wood spacer into the mouth so it will hold the right oval as it rests. The cats decide to make a slow patrol. One emerges from under the bench with the sneaking caution all cats must perform even when nothing requires it. The other follows as if pretending it invented the idea. They tour the baseboards, encounter nothing remarkable, and return to their quilt as if they had defeated a small but dangerous piece of shadow. He smiles at their industry and returns his eyes to the line. Frost ferns have drafted a complete meadow on the lower panes now. He draws the lamps down a breath so the glass will not feel teased, then loosens the collar of his coat one button. The body learns to be night furniture in these hours, quiet, ready, range so attention can live in the hands. He lifts the pocket watch, listens to its tick a full 5 seconds, and lays it on the desk again. Time and wire, stove and lamp, paper and pencil each keeps the others honest. He aligns the next blank, uncaps the pencil, and rests his wrist at the blotter's edge, ready to receive whatever small, decent business the dark decides to send. The hour slides forward until even the stove seems to breathe more slowly. Outside, the sky is still a lid, but a thinner one, as if some distant hand has lifted it a finger's width. Frost holds its lace along the lower panes, but the top edge grows less sure of itself. He chooses this quiet slope toward morning to ready the catcher pouch. It waits on the lower rung, mouth propped by the narrow wood spacer he set earlier. The neck's leather collar shows the patient shine that comes from hands and oil, not polish. He loosens the tie, removes the spacer, and squares the opening with both thumbs. Canvas remembers to sit round. From the sorting table he brings 3 tied bundles, each cross-laced with twine, County North, Junction West, and River City. He presses a finger to each knot to make sure they will not try tricks at speed. On the top bundle, he tucks the facing slip so its name will be the first to greet the morning clerk when the bag is cut. He lays the parcels into the depth of the pouch in an order the hand can trust without looking heaviest low, then smaller stacks. Then the light things, 2 narrow tubes with invoices rolled inside and a small envelope, containing a watch part wrapped in tissue and addressed in microscopic care. He seats the spacer again to keep the mouth exactly oval, not pinched. The neck strap slides through its ring with a slow, leathery whisper. He checks the hook plate for any burr and finds none. He lifts the pouch, lets its weight settle into his arms, then sets it down again to take the brass scales measure. The dial settles without hurry. The number is friendly. He writes it in the ledger, underlines once, and then passes a palm across the entry to press the pencil into the page as if asking it to stay. Bundles for the local pouches follow. He arranges letters in stacks that have their own quiet logic farm roads first, so the carrier who walks furthest can be out the door with the dawn, shop street next, then small lanes that braid behind fences. He ties each with twine that gives willingly but holds with a square knot. He turns the bundle so the stamps face the same corner, a small grace that pays for itself. For the smallest pile to notes and a postcard with a chicken scratched in the corner, he uses a narrow paper band cut from an old timetable. The band carries yesterday's times on its tiny spine. Today it learns a new job. The wire taps a postcard's worth of news. A station on the branch sends a small line. Creek ice thin at Ford, teen will cross by bridge. He copies and adds a parenthesis for himself. Tell section at breakfast. Then slides the slip under the glass weight so it will not go walking. Another tap follows from farther east. Morning passenger left on time. He answers with his initials, just enough to say, I heard. From down the track, two lanterns begin to bob, then steady. The section crew has decided to look in on the points before light. He used the iron latch of the yard gate and the careful boot-top men use when the ground is slick. He opens the outer door a hand's width and lets their breath clouds in with them. Morning, or near enough, the foreman says, voice low out of respect for a sleeping room. His mustache wears frost like sugar. Behind him, the younger man carries a small burlap roll that clinks gently. Tools never hide their voices for long. Wind's gone east a little, the operator says. Switch lamps good. Wires sang a bit. Fine sound, the foreman answers, as if a wire song were a hymn one could hum. He sets his lantern on the floor, not the desk. He is the kind who knows where light should stand. He signs the margin of the night log with a neat surname to say he was here, then writes to plain words on a scrap, grease points. The younger man sets the burlap roll down and shows 3 thin wedges. Iron kept quiet with a rub of tallow and a small tin of graphite. Nothing sharp. Everything meant to persuade metal to behave kindly until Sun thinks to join in. They share a minute near the stove, palms above the lid where heat lifts through iron, and trade short weather sentences without complaint inside them. The foreman nods toward the mail pouches. All right for the crane, he asks, meaning the catcher arm and the saddle on the post down the line. The operator nods and taps the collar of the prepared pouch with 2 fingers. Oval and steady, he says. That is enough. Lanterns rise again. The men step out, the door lip tapping their boot soles in farewell. Through the window, their lights make 2 small coins moving through frost. The operator watches the yellow disappear into the darker gray and then sets the latch to its ordinary place. He returns to the desk where the date stamp sits ready. He thumbs the wheel without looking now. The movement lives in bones. He stamps the corner of 2 more notices, one for the doctor, one for a crake, and lays them aside. He sharpens a pencil half a turn and sets it point forward in a shallow groove he rubbed into the desk long ago to keep it from rolling to the floor. The kettle sighs at a temperature that asks for respect. He sets the enamel cup on the stove's flat ring and warms its bottom so the next sip will feel less like winter and more like habit. He opens the tin of biscuits and breaks one into 3 pieces, because 3 is a calming number for food at night. 1 he eats, 1 waits on the paper, 1 he keeps for the hour when gray becomes color. Outside, the order board's colored face keeps its steady watch. He lifts the window latch to fingers to let a narrow ribbon of cold in for balance. Frost feathers near the opening begin to soften and withdraw, not vanishing, just agreeing to live a little closer to the glass. A tiny drop crawls down and leaves a clear path behind it the width of a hair. He mends the soft cover of the rule book with a dab of glue at the corner that had started to forget its job. He presses the corner under the glass paperweight for a minute, counting quietly to 30. He removes the weight and sees the paper sit flush again, pleased with itself. He replaces the book on the shelf exactly where the dust shadow says it belongs. The sounder speaks with the careful hand of the dispatcher to the east this time. A short form, no extras on the night line. Morning passenger unchanged. He reads it back, adds his initials, and pencils a small check mark beside the entry in the log. He writes two words in the margin, still as holes, which no rule requires and which will not offend any. Rule. He checks the catcher arm one more time, moving it through its arc without lifting it fully into the oncoming position. The pivot answers with a round, modest motion. He oils the hinge with a drop of machine oil from the little brass tin that lives in the drawer behind the string. He wipes the extra with rag. Oil should not go wandering. Pigeons in the roof truss give a soft, wintry mutter, tight as thread. The cats, feeling a change in the timbre of the room, sit up and look toward the door with solemn agreement, then decide there is no action to supervise, and fold themselves down again. He reaches for the pocket watch, winds it with the care you give a sleeping child's blanket, and holds it to the ear. The tick is centered and content. He sets it beside the ledger and lines their edges so they share the same small horizon. Light in the east is still a rumor, but a kinder rumor now. The upper panes shade toward pearl. He trims the wick a hair, lowers the lamp until the brass's reflection goes from bright to quiet, and lets the office listen. The wire sends a last whisper from a town farther than his thoughts want to walk. Bread early, ovens full, a message not for him, and still somehow for everyone who wakes to the smell of crust. He copies it to a slip and tucks it near the bulletin that will greet the first passengers. He smooths the catcher pouch's collar with his palm, sets it on the lower rung with its mouth facing the door, and rests his hand there a moment, not as a farewell, only as a touch that tells a tool it has been seen. Morning will come with decisions in it, but not yet. For a few more minutes, the room stays held in the even balance that night teaches. The room begins to notice a color that is not lamp. It enters first as a suggestion along the top panes, then as a pearl wash that makes the brass look softer and the wood a shade lighter. He turns the lamp wick down until the flame is a small, useful memory, and sets the glass chimney straight with to fingertips. The stove gives a last content tick. The cats, as if reading the same page, stretch long, then short, then fold their paws neatly under themselves to watch a morning happen. He lifts the prepared catcher pouch. The canvas has taken the night shape well, round mouth, steady collar, bundles arranged by weight and promise. He checks the facing slip once more, names crisp, pencil dark, and draws the neck strap through its ring with a pull he has done so often it sounds like greeting. Lantern in hand, he opens the door and steps out to meet air that no longer bites, only reminds. The platform holds a faint glaze where frost tried to stay. His boots find the sure boards without argument. Along the right of way, the catcher post waits with its iron saddle. He sets the pouch into place, collar out, strap seated, and tests the hold with a tug that is not suspicious, only kind. The pouch sits like a bird on a quiet branch. He lowers the lantern shade, gives the leather one last smoothing pass, and steps back to see the oval from the track's eye. A hand at the saddle, He nods once, habit granting approval, and turns toward the office. Inside, he pulls the order board lever through its small arc to check motion. The lamp's green face stays calm. He notes the time in the log and writes a brief line. Catcher Pachang. Air still. He sets the train register on the desk with tonight's page ready for the next sync moment and pencils the engine number for the morning mail where it will go, leaving the slot empty until the iron proves the rest. The wire taps once, then pauses, then offers a short line from the junction. Nail on time, crew cheerful. He copies the words into the margin, because cheer carried on wire is still a fact. He stamps a last notice for the bulletin board. None or a bakery cart will meet the train and pins it next to the doctor's slip and the creek note. The 3 pieces of paper make a kind arrangement of village life: bread, help, caution. He raises the window latch a thumb and lets a ribbon of gray drift through the room. Frost feathers begin to release in slow kindness, not melting all at once, only loosening their grip. Droplets gather along the lower edge and stand like beads, undecided. He wipes a small circle in the corner with the back of a knuckle to see the track's far light. The glass answers with a clean point of view. He checks the catcher arm in the office one last time. The iron face that will take the incoming sack outside sits at its rest. He moves it through its swing short of latch, oil working as it should, then sets it back, ready for the station side exchange. He lays a clean canvas square on the sorting table to receive the bag, trims a ragged edge from a piece of twine, and drops the cut end in the ash pail so the floor will not collect it later. Far down the line a low tone begins, the kind that belongs to a train before its wheels decide to speak. He closes the outside door gently and takes his place by the half door to the platform, lantern set low on the step. He opens the register, steadies the pencil, and keeps his eyes on the track's approach, not to see the train he has seen hundreds, but to see this one belong to the morning. The mail shows itself with the manners of its hour. Headlight moderate, stacked breathing evenly, cars neat behind. The clerk in the mail car will ride the catcher arm out at just the right space before the post. His bag will fly into the hook's mouth as if it grew there. The station saddle waits with its pouch, ready to give. It is a choreography of inches performed at speed and learned by hands who do not wish to be exciting. The engine passes with a respectful sigh. The car with the catcher arm arrives iron out, canvas ready, and in the smallest piece of time the 2 motions rhyme. The outgoing bag lifts clean from its saddle. The incoming bag leaves the hook to clear the car's mouth. Cloth thumps, leather hums, ropes talk, and then the mail is exchanged as if by thought. The train does not hurry, does not dawdle. It moves on, wheels speaking a long sentence that becomes several shorter ones as distance edits. He steps to the post and eases the empty strap from the saddle. He carries the incoming pouch like a basket of ordinary miracles. Back inside, he places it on the clean canvas square and cuts the tie with the back of the twine knife so the string can be used again later. The mouth opens, the day begins to have names. Letters and cards, and 2 small wrapped parcels show their corners. He turns the pouch upside down by its collar, gives one polite shake, and returns it to the hook to rest. He sorts with the speed of someone who still thinks slowly. Local streets first, road names next, then farther towns where a second train will carry them onward. He weaves the 2 parcels, as if asking each its story. One is buttons in a little tin, the other is seeds labeled by hand, spring spoken in ink. He writes their numbers in the ledger and places them in a square wooden tray where the morning man will find them without looking for anything else. The wire ticks a brief hello from the next station west, a simple bag good, which is both confirmation and compliment. He answers with his initials, stamps the register line for the mail, and writes on time, exchange clean. He underlines once. Underlines more than once are for engines that complain. Cats advance to sniff the empty pouch with solemnity. The canvas carries the cold and the faint scent of distant wood smoke. Satisfied, they circle and settle again, deciding that watching people read letters is work for later. He opens the lamp's wick one last half-turn to brighten the desk long enough to make the closing entries. In the log he writes a short, tidy summary of the hours. No extras. Clean wire, went east, frost at first, and draws a small box around the night. He cleans the nib against the cloth with two gentle strokes and corks the inkwell. He caps the pencils and lays them side by side, points left so the day agent's reach will be the same as his. He stands and looks at the room as if it were a map to be folded. The stove is banked to kindness, the lamp sits low and ready for a final snuff, the mail hangs where a morning will find it, the desk holds exactly what a day requires, and nothing it does not. He pulls the window shade a hand lower to soften the first glare. He hangs the lantern on its nail so its hood will not dent. He straightens the rule book on the shelf and touches the cover's newly mended corner like a small thank you. Then he opens the outer door wide enough that the station can learn its light. Air enters without edge. The platform boards show their wood again. The first bird writes a note in the eaves and pauses to see if anyone will answer. The section crew's footprints from the hour before lie like modest commas at the gate. Somewhere down the street, a bakery sets down a tray and laughs quietly with the door. He pulls the half door to the office open for the day, leaves the log where a hand can greet it, and drapes the key on its nail. He crosses the waiting room with slow steps so the benches will remember he was kind. At the outer latch he stops and does what he always does when the night has been good. He turns and lets his eyes take the whole of the small place in one glance: the desk, the lamp, the stove, the window, the wires beyond. Tools and time, light and paper, cats and rails. All of it agreed to be ordinary in ways that keep a town sewn to itself. He steps outside. The door closes with the soft, decent sound of wood meeting wood. In the east, the sky changes from pearl to milk. He puts his hands in his pockets, feels the pencil he forgot to leave on the desk, and smiles at the tiny mischief of it. The day man's boots will sound on the path in a few minutes. The line holds steady. The little office holds steady too. Now these stories will keep you company as you rest. Thank you for listening, and sweet dreams.